I think everybody can hear me. First, on behalf of the Leon County School System, I want to thank all of our superintendents that are here. We really appreciate, I know everybody's busy, you got a lot going on in your district, and appreciate you taking time to be here. We're going to get started by going around the room and just recognizing everybody that is here. And then we're going to start with a briefing from Wayne Blanton of the Florida School Board Association as far as legislative priorities. And then we're going to introduce some of our elected officials that are here so they can give some priorities. And then we'll go around and let each superintendent and superintendent representative talk about some of the issues, 3 to 5, 6 minutes that you're facing in your county. And we're going to try to capture all of these so we can give this information back to you at the conclusion of the meeting, send it to everybody so you would have it. But again, on behalf of all the superintendents that are here, thank you for being here today. I think it means a lot, and I think this has been a great event that we've had every year. We've been able to learn so much from each other as far as some of the things that we're trying to accomplish during these very difficult times, challenging times. At 2 o'clock today, the commissioner will be here. He said he'd be here for a full hour, and he said any questions that we want to ask him, he's going to be willing to answer. So save your questions for the commissioner. So he'll be here today. But I'm just going to start, and we'll go to my right and let everybody introduce themselves and the county they're representing, and so we can get this. I'm Jackie Pons, Superintendent of Schools here in Leon County, and welcome to our school system. And also, I've had some questions today about compressed natural gas. If you want to see our CNG facility, we can make sure it's just right up the road. It's been a pretty unique adventure for us as far as transitioning all of our buses to CNG. Recently purchased 44 new buses that are heading, and we're going that direction as an entire district. It's very, very exciting, so we can show that to you while you're here. And also for some of the smaller counties that are here, we have a safety and security monitoring system that we're doing 24-hour monitoring. And we're actually reaching out to some of the other districts that might need help with that because of the limited resources that we all have. And we're doing something in partnership with Wakulla now, which we're actually helping them monitor. And I'm sure you all have certain monitoring systems, but you have the access to not only have that at your desk where you're sitting every day as a superintendent, where you can look at all your schools, but also where we have 24-hour somebody actually monitoring those sites in our safety and security building, which is pretty neat. So if something happens, we're able to pull that up for you and also record what's going on at the same time. This is my deputy superintendent. Go ahead.
Marvin Henderson, Leon County. Thank you. Good afternoon. Scotty Crow, Assistant Superintendent, Teaching and Learning, Leon County School.
Wade Blanton, Florida School Boards.
Good afternoon. Kelvin Norton, Assistant Superintendent, Teaching and Learning, Jefferson County.
Obviously, I'm not Representative Michelle Raymond-Vasalinda, but I am a staff assistant / economist in her office.
Brittany Floyd. I'm also not Mr. Representative Bashir's, but I am Brittany Floyd, and I'm one of his district secretaries.
Hello, I'm Mary Beth Jackson, Superintendent, Okaloosa County.
Gloria Uzell, Superintendent, Liberty County. Thank you for hosting us.
Terry Huddleston, Superintendent, Columbia County.
Robbie Edwards, Superintendent, Lafayette County.
Sarah Jo Luke, Assistant Superintendent for Instruction, Gulf County.
Joe Taylor, Superintendent, Washington County.
State Representative Alan Williams, representing Gaston and Leon County.
Bill Husfeld, Superintendent, Bay County.
Barbara Wills, Assistant Superintendent, Leon County.
Reginald James, Superintendent, Gadsden County.
And we also have Superintendent Dial and Superintendent Dial from Taylor County and Superintendent Pierce from Wakulla County finishing up an interview in the other room, so they'll join us in just a couple of minutes. If we could, I know Wayne, you have to leave and do something. If you would go ahead and kind of start us off with a briefing from the School Board Association as far as important issues. And again, thank you for your friendship and for what you're doing for education throughout the state.
No problem, no problem. Thank you. The information I'm going to give you today is mutual information. It's the same thing. The Superintendents Association and Florida School Board Association are all going to be working on these particular same issues that we've got right now. I'm going into my Representative Williams 38th legislative session, so I'm aging myself a little bit. This will be my 38th. This will be my 38th session as representing boards, superintendents, and education throughout the state of Florida. I anticipate a pretty good session overall, and I say that in the fact that if you look at where we've been the last 4 or 5 years, just about anything is an improvement because all of you have had to face all the cuts and things of that nature. And I'm going to talk to you just a little bit in just a second about the budget. But probably the thing that I've seen, and all of us in this room know that in representing education 30 and 35 years or so, you never thought that arming our teachers or school safety or having uniformed police officers at every school would be something we would have to spend the majority of our time discussing. But I will tell you, since the incident in Connecticut, and Representative Williams and the others can tell you that we've spent a tremendous amount of time having discussions about school safety. Our position has been that we will support uniform officers in public schools, and we will not support under any circumstances arming teachers. That's insane, and we will not support that, and I have not seen a lot of support for that in the legislature, and we're not going to have that kind of thing. Uniform officers are a different situation. But what we have done in a number of presentations to the legislature so far is say that as you put more school safety money out there, give you at the local level the flexibility to use that money. What Gadsden County needs may not be what Dade County needs in being able to spend their school safety money. And you and your local school boards and your local administrators should have the decision on that school safety money. Now, last year you got $64 million in school safety money, and the governor recommended $74 million. That's a $10 million increase. That's not enough. If you're going to put uniform officers out there in most of our public schools, it's going to cost, folks. It's probably going to be at least $100 million more than what we've got on the table right now. So you're looking at somewhere $150 to $160 million if they're going to give us those dollars. And remember, school safety is not necessarily just uniformed police officers. There are other things you need. Our new schools, for instance, are designed with long hallways where you can have surveillance cameras at the end of each hallway and you can see everything in the hallway. Our old schools have all these nooks and crannies and all these kind of things and stairwells, and you have to put surveillance cameras in a lot of different places. We need to control access, and some of you have open campuses and people can wander in and out from anywhere, and you need be able to spend some dollars to control out access so that the flow of people will go into a certain area all the time. We're talking about we've already started this in most districts. Some of the teachers told us that they cannot lock their classrooms from inside. And so we've asked you to start changing the locks so that you can lock your classroom doors from the inside. And in the case of an emergency, that may vary from district to district. And that comes back from the old fire code. That comes back from some of the fire code provisions that we've got to look at. Some of the teachers are asking that we have safety glass in the room. Some teachers are saying maybe we shouldn't have glass that you can see into the classroom at all. That is not my call. That is your call out there as superintendents in the local area as to how you can do some of those things locally. But all of those things cost money. There's none of those that I just mentioned that are for free. And so if you've got the flexibility locally, you can decide with your administrators and teachers and others what makes your schools the safest.
Wayne, let me just interject. You know those locks are like $250 each.
Yes, I understand. They're very expensive. That's why I'm saying when we ask for this money, this additional well over $100 million more, when you ask for that, I'm saying that, I'm not saying you should do it.
Oh, I know.
I'm simply saying that those are some of the things that have been put on the table for us that are cost over and above uniform officers. And uniform officers, if you talk about a uniform officer, you know, the sheriff's departments are telling us it costs about $95,000 to put a uniform officer there. Now that's the pay and the fringe benefits, the weapons, the training, the automobile, you know, different kind of things. So those are the kind of things you're going to have to work out that how you're going to share those costs with your local law enforcement agencies. That's not my call in Tallahassee. I don't think it should be the legislature's call as to how each individual person should spend those dollars, but if they'll give you the flexibility, we're more than willing to report back as to how we spent that money and what it's good for out there as you work with your local law enforcement. The governor's budget, as you know, he got a lot of splash by putting $2,500 per teacher but you also know that the legislature sets the budget, not the governor. And while the governor has some policy decisions out there in his budget, we also know that $2,500 or whatever that end result money is going to be negotiated locally between you and your teachers union. We also know that there are media specialists and other people out there and counselors and others that are going to be expected that they have not gotten a pay raise in many years, and to say just the classroom teachers are going to get it may or may not be what the legislature wants to do. The legislature is not leaning toward saying it's all teachers and no one else. You've got food service workers, you've got maintenance people, you've got bus drivers, have not had any raises in a long time. But what the governor did by putting that $2,500 out there, he basically put another $480 million on the table that I don't think was going to be there before that. And so you've got what the legislature was looking at, and then the $480 million. The governor has personally told me on several occasions that he will veto any budget that has a cut for public schools. So, this year's budget will be there and hopefully a little bit more. His budget produced $412 more per student. I don't know if that's the final budget that will be there, but you can count on the fact that I think there will be some increase for public schools from the legislature this year. Also in the governor's budget, remember that there was $300 million in the governor's budget that would be reimbursed over to the Florida retirement system. There's $500 million total in the budget right now that the governor put forward that's spread out in several areas that is a payback right back to the Florida retirement system. So when he put that $1.2 billion out there, $300 million of that would go back in as employer contribution to the Florida retirement system. One of the things we're asking is that as we get into the Florida retirement system issue, is that whatever the budget is for the Florida retirement system, that it be a separate line item. Because if you roll it into the FEFP, some people will go home and say, we gave you a 4% increase, and oh, by the way, 1.5% or 2% has to come back to the state. So we are asking that the Florida retirement system dollars always be a separate line item. While I'm on the Florida retirement system, let me make a couple of comments about this. One, the train has left the station on the fact that the Florida retirement system is going to change. Now, how it's going to change, I'm not sure yet. There's a lot of discussion about defined benefits, defined contributions, only new employees coming in after 2014. One of the things that's disturbing to me in my long-term experience is you've got a lot of people coming up with solutions yet, and the actuarial studies aren't here yet. And until we see that what the actuarial studies do, it's premature to be making any discussion about what we should do on the Florida retirement system. So I think those reports are due in just a couple of weeks. Within the next 2 or 3 weeks, you have to look at it. Because remember, in the 8-year retirement before you vest, 70% of the people in the Florida retirement system today never vest. Those retirement contributions that you make, they stay in the Florida retirement system. If you go to a defined contribution plan, when those people leave before 8 years, they take that money with them. It does not stay in the Florida retirement system. So what you've got in the long run is a potential actuarial gap there of reimbursement for the future of that. Now, if the state's going to come in like the governor suggested and put $500 million in right now, then good. They just put $500 million in every year, and you don't worry about that. But that's been one of the legs that the Florida retirement system has stood on for many years, is the fact that people leave. They leave their contribution in there. They don't take it with them. Under defined contribution, when they leave, they get their contribution goes with them. The FRS will be a big issue. A couple other quick things. Number one, there's a big learning curve this year, particularly in the House. There's 44 new House members. I don't even know all their first names yet. I don't know if I will by the end of the session, but we're trying. There are 14 new senators. Most of us know the senators because most of them came from the House, and we'll be working with them. A couple other quick things is one, charter schools. There's some issues out there that we've got some problems with charter schools, and the fact that they want your facilities at no cost. That's, and basically it comes from Pembroke Pines. Pembroke Pines has their own, in Broward County, they have their own charter school. The city took over the charter school, and all of a sudden the city is saying we can't afford, on the dollars we're getting for running the schools, we can't afford it. We need some free buildings and things of that nature. So the fact is, and now some of the charter school individuals are coming in and asking that they be able to use, and at no charge, your facilities, and of course, you're supposed to also keep them up. We're not going to be supportive of that, obviously, and I think that'll need a lot of work. We support charter schools, and I think what we have to realize is in charter schools, most of you are not having any difficulties with your charter schools, what I call the normal nonprofit charter schools. Most of our difficulty, quite frankly, from charter schools is coming from the for-profit groups that are running charter schools around the state. The mom and pops, the church affiliated, those kind of charters, we're not having a lot of problems with. But to come in and say they could just take some of your facilities and use them, that is not going to fly. Last but not least, there was an ethics bill up that we'll be passing out probably the first or second week of the session. There was a real problem in there about dual employment, and some school board members and others, for instance, they may work for Florida State, or they may work for Florida A&M, and or a governmental entity, and there was a dual employment prohibition in that ethics bill that says that you cannot have dual employment, and if you do, you cannot take additional compensation during the time you're on the school board, and you're a constitutional officer. The Peck County Commissioner is the same way, by the way. We amended that bill earlier this week that basically says that when the public officer knows with the exercise of reasonable care, or should know, primary establishment compensated by the employer for the purpose of gaining influence or other advantage based on the public officer's elective office or candidacy. What we basically said is that that takes care of your constitutional officers, both county commissioners, city commissioners, and others. If they have another job with a governmental entity, they can keep it, as long as there's no indication they have been promoted because they got elected as a county commissioner or city commissioner or a school board member. We're fairly certain this clears up that problem. A lot of the constitutional officers were concerned. You've got legislators, for instance, that work at universities, and it could have affected them. And so we think we've cleared that up. With that, Mr. Superintendent, that's a quick little synopsis of where we are. I talk fast for a country boy, but I'll be glad to answer any questions. And I apologize for having to leave earlier today, but about noon I've got a conference call coming up a little later this afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you, Wayne. If we have any questions, I've got one to start it, and then if any superintendents, y'all want to jump in there with any questions. Wayne, on the charter school issue, like you said, I think we're all, here in Leon County, we've got several charter schools that do a great job, that we are supportive of, and they put every dime that they have back into their schools and more. We have Steele Collins, we have Arts and Science, but my concern on this is, and I'm not sure legally, I'd like to get your opinion on this. If you have a charter school that is a for-profit, and they take over, and somehow the legislature directs us to give a building to them, and let's say it doesn't work out, and then they leave out of there, would we retain the building back at that time, or could they? I mean, there have been instances where they've gone out and sold some of these buildings that they got themselves, and I'm not sure that it's legal to take the dollars that the taxpayers are paying in communities and turn them over to for-profit businesses like that. I mean, what's your feeling on that?
Well, we have a bill that Senator Simmons will sponsor and Senator Munford will co-sponsor, and we're looking for the House and Senate sponsors now, but we have a bill that's going to tighten down substantially on those type of issues with charter schools. Yeah. And I think it's going to tighten down not only what they can do with public facilities and how the payback and all those kind of things happen, but it's also going to tighten down on compensation. In fact, there's already a bill pre-filed that says charter schools cannot compensate their administrators or teachers at any level over and above what you are doing to your current public school teachers. Here's what happened and what led to that, and I think that's a good bill. We'll support that bill. But what led to that was there was a charter school for 138 students in Orange County that closed. It shut down one Friday, and they paid the principal $500,000. They paid her $500,000 going out the door, and then when we checked further into that, she had been making $305,000 a year before as a principal for a failed school of 138 students. Now, that, and when the Orange County School Board challenged that, They said, well, we had the money, you paid us the money, we built up a reserve, and that's what we chose to do with it. So Senator Simmons went ballistic, and he should have, and so did the rest of us. So there will be a bill, Superintendent Pons, there will be a bill tightening down the parameters of what charter schools can do, and it will pass.
That's good.
Let me ask a follow-up.
Bill?
Wayne, you've been around a lot longer than most of us have, as you pointed out earlier. and we have a great relationship with our charter schools also, but my question is this. When charter schools first started, one of their big draws was that they didn't have any need for LCI dollars or capital dollars, that they weren't into that. That wasn't what they were about. Am I right or wrong?
You're right.
And that's changed, and nobody's brought that up. That's what I
Well,
can't.
now the charter schools are getting the dollars in the PICO, what few dollars there are in PICO. They're getting the PICO dollars, and at the same time, now they're saying, we want you to give us a free school. Well, if you're going to get a free school, maybe we should get PICO dollars back. I mean, you can't have it both ways and where it is. The other thing that charter schools said is we can do more without regulations and those kind of things. And now we're beginning to push for legislative approval to let us, you as superintendents, have less regulation and everything so that you can become a charter district. We're working with Leon County to start looking at how to set up a model charter district program so that you can be relieved of some of the regulations that are out there right now. Superintendent Pons and I were talking about this the other day. We're trying to work that program up to give you a model program where individual districts can apply to be a charter district and get out of some of the regulations just as the charter schools have done. But yes, you're correct on that they can. The other thing too about building in charter schools go out and say that they can build their facilities for less money than you can. And you know what? That's correct, because they don't have all the state safety regulations and things of that nature that you have to do. And if they say they can build for $50 a square foot less, the answer is probably correct. But the fact is, they're not building to the same safety standards that you're required to build to as a public school.
Mr. Bland, could you tell me why the governor and the legislature for the past 2 years has promoted giving all the PICO funds to charter schools and zero to public schools?
You have some powerful charter school lobbyists, and at $55 million is what it's been. That's all the money that's in PICO. Now, if you go back historically, there was a time when we'd get $400, $500, $600 million in PICO dollars. There's a whole lot of reasons that PICO dollars have dropped off, and that's another issue that sometime we're going to have to look at very closely, because capital outlay dollars are not there. But their lobbyists have contributed substantially to a lot of campaigns. They spent $800,000 last year on lobbying expenses for the lobbyists that were there for the charter schools, and so I think that answers the question. But that with $55 million, and they will go and say, we don't have the ability to levy the 1.5 mils. Their answer is, we can't levy 1.5 mils to generate dollars, and you as school districts around the state can levy the 1.5, which happens to be correct, that we can produce hundreds of millions of dollars with that 1.5, and at $55 million, they've been able to get that amount for the last 2 years. That may or may not happen this year. The bigger question on that, and I've talked to charter school people and said they will work with us if we could try to find additional capital outlay dollars for everybody. You know, if you're getting $500 million and charter schools get 50 and you get $450, that's one thing. If you're fighting over $55 million, and I know it sounds like a lot of money here, but if you're fighting over $55 million in the legislature, that's not necessarily one you fall on your sword over. If you could use that to come back and use the charter school people to help you work out something for additional capital outlay dollars in a large amount. And there's a lot of reasons capital outlay is down, and that's a whole different time and workshop, but I'd be glad to discuss it with you at any time.
Thank you.
Other questions for
Thank
Wayne?
you.
Okay, if we could go ahead and introduce our state representative, Alan Williams, and represents the House. And Alan was a former student of mine when I was at Rickards High School. He's doing a great job for education, and and I would like to say that our local delegation is very supportive of public education, and we appreciate that. I mean, it's great to have, and Alan, if you could kind of give us a State of the Union for the House, and I'm sure there's some questions we'd like to ask you, but welcome and thank you for being here.
Well, first of all, thank you, Superintendent Pons, Coach Pons, as all the folks at Ricketts High School knew him. We were winning state championships.
Now you're just bragging.
Yeah, no, it was the truth. It's not bragging when it's the truth, but you know, it is indeed an honor and privilege to serve Gaston County and Leon County, and we have two of the greatest superintendents in the state. I know I'm with other ones, but you know, I'm a little biased. But we have some other great ones as well. But definitely in North Florida, I think, man, we look at education a lot differently than the rest of the state, because we know that the children and the families we serve in this part of the state, we don't have a lot of corporate industry. We don't have a lot of the other amenities that other parts of the state have. And so a lot of times, whether it's public education, whether it's Friday evenings, you know, Friday night lights, you know, it brings the community together. And a lot of that is in large part due to our public education system. And so I just want to say thank you to all of our superintendents for what you do. You know, right now in this session, you know, we've seen what I think, as Wayne has kind of touched on, we've seen a mentality by a lot of the charter schools of a kind of snatch and grab mentality. We've seen the charter school advocates, you know, the door was kind of creaked open just a little bit, and now they're kicking it open, you know, both feet. And, you know, when we look at policies, I think it's bad public policy whenever we say buildings that the school districts own and operate, that we are required to give them to these charter schools. Nowhere in our documents and our laws that govern us does it state that these institutions are required. No one's saying you got to open this charter school, right? But everywhere within our documents, it says, and one of the most important pieces in our Constitution, it says that we must provide and compensate for public education. So the jobs that each and every one of you do, it's required by the highest level. And for our charter schools to come in and think that we should just give them certain things, I think it's bad public policy, and I think it's bad policy for even our governor to want to give them the additional funding for PICO, all in the name of you know, trying to make the marketplace or trying to make competition brings out the best in everybody. No, what brings out the best is when we fund education appropriately. It's been working since the beginning of time, and if we do it the right way, it works. One thing I will say that I think the $2,500 obviously is a great start, and the governor is to be. I think the governor is starting to see what we've already seen for so many years. It was great to come in with a merit pay system, but we have to start at the very basic level, and that's what I think the $2,500 initiative idea is trying to do. But you're right, as Wayne said, you know, we got a lot of other folks who are, you know, who are part of the educational process, and if we don't fund them, you're going to be picking winners and losers, and it's going to hurt the morale in your schools, in your school districts. And so we have to make sure we do this in a very moderate and balanced approach as far as compensating folks who have not been compensated for a very, very long time. You know, one thing I will tell you, Superintendent Pons, is, you know, it's great to put out budgets. You know, the governor put out his budget, but I'm less concerned about the budget he puts out, or he put out last week, and more concerned about the budget he signs in June or May or what have you. That's when the rubber hits the road. And you know what we're going to do. We have a strong team in the House, in our Democratic caucus, but we have a lot of our Republican colleagues who say, you know, maybe not publicly, that they're concerned about a lot of the initiatives put forth in that budget. We have a strong team in the Senate. We're fortunate to have Senator Dwight Bullard, who left the House. We're a little disappointed in that, but Wayne, as you know, Senator Bullard is their education star over there in the Senate, and we're going to be leaning on him to help us kind of guide this process throughout. And what we're going to need is for you to be up there. One thing I will tell you, and I say this all the time, and I know we don't do it around here, but a lot of times after session is over, Superintendent Pons, and all the things that happen to education, public education, and we're frustrated and we're scratching our heads, and my wife, who's does a lot of work in the education community as an attorney, we're always talking about it around the kitchen table. You go back home, and then the superintendents, they or as principals, they invite these legislators in who have voted against these good public policies, right? Or put public policy in place that hurts school districts. But then they're out there giving graduation speeches and saying how much education is important. Well, it doesn't jive. It doesn't. Their words don't match up with their actions when they're in session, and that concerns me. I know it's part of the, you want to keep those relationships open, but at the same time, they have to respect the relationship that they have with each and every one of you, and that's what's sometimes frustrating to me. But I would tell you this, that hopefully we will give you the flexibility you need. We give it to cities and counties on their millage issues. Why not give it to the school boards? Why not give it to those who are entrusted with the most precious resource that we have? If Vince Long, our county administrator, can go and pay for a mosquito truck and raise the millage, he can do that. Or pay for a millage increase to go expand Larry Campbell's jail over there. But Jackie Pons and each and every one of you cannot increase the millage without going, without your board. You have to go to the voters, and I think that's a bad sign that we're giving to our constitutional officers who are entrusted with educating our youth. And at some point, I don't know if it's this session or next session, Wayne, we got to deal with that too, because we don't need to have, you guys need to be as nimble and as flexible as the businesses that we talk about recruiting to the state. If those businesses had to do the same thing that you had to do in operating your business of educating kids, they would be very, very frustrated and upset, and they would be going back to Texas and California and other places. So, the state of public education, I think, is what we make it. We got an opportunity to, I think, with the upcoming election, to really hammer home the point. We did it 2 years ago. I think you saw a lot of folks getting educated, and then once the elections were behind us, folks kind of went back into what they normally are accustomed to, and I think we have to remind them of that, and that elections have consequences, and that budgets really show your priorities. And so I'm looking forward to working with each and every one of you this session. We got a lot of challenges ahead of us, but it's nothing that we can't face head on and overcome. And with the right folks and the right direction, we can do that. And that's why I'm glad you brought together this group, Superintendent Pons.
Al, I know you got to leave in a minute, but before you do, I know we're going to go around the room, and all the superintendents are going to talk about issues that they're concerned about, and different issues, because we represent a large area, a geographic area that with different needs in rural districts, and maybe they have in Tallahassee or Bay, but we all have needs. And a few things that are really out there that we really need to get some help from in this session is number one, the EOCs. The end of course exams are a real concern when it comes to graduation rates throughout the state, and making sure that we have different pathways to graduation. Superintendent Dial and Pierce were in there talking on NPR, and they made some great points that, every child is not heading in the same direction. And I think sometimes we lose focus of that. And we have some children that want to get industry level certification so they can go out and work in Microsoft or the next technology job. We have other children that are wanting to go into four-year college, and some that want to go to junior colleges. And as superintendents, we've always supported higher standards and even EOCs, but to come in and say, when you get one attempt on an EOC and you fail it, and you're not going to graduate, and not to have that EOC given in a way that the part of it that is mastered by the student, that they would get credit for that. Then when they retake it, they would only retake the areas that they needed to. and not putting any funding attached to how we're going to help those children, get over that bar so they can graduate. I mean, there are projections that our graduation rates could go below 50% as a state if we follow the path we are. And there's several states that have put this in as 30% or 40% or some that offered other courses. And even today, the commissioner is going to talk about, because they did some creative things, he said, even in Indiana. So I hope that's getting some real attention, and I think it is. We had a group that went up there yesterday, and there were 4 superintendents that spoke, and it seemed like that on both sides, Republicans and Democrats, there seems to be some common sense going on, related to that. Also, the VAM, the evaluation criteria for our teachers, what's going on with that is a real issue that I'm sure we're going to hear from today. We believe in high performance, and obviously, if a teacher's not doing what they need to do in the classroom, we need to be able to get them out of there. We'd all agree on that. But if we're going to go with something to evaluate, we got to make sure that it's not 80% correct, 90%, it's 100%, because these are individuals' jobs. They're based on that. School safety, with what's happened around the nation, with what's going on, I think in all communities, we're not only dealing with the physical safety of our schools, but the emotional safety of our parents and students too. And that's putting a lot of...
And employees.
And employees. And it's putting a lot of pressure. And so I hope the legislature would give consideration, to that also. And again, funding. I mean, I certainly appreciate the fact that the governor moved forward. It's a step in the right direction, but we also have to remember what these districts have lost. And when you're running a bus system in Taylor County and Wakulla, you're covering a long, you got to go to the furthest point of that county to pick students up. And in Gadsden the same way, and the funding that has been lost in these districts over the past 4 years, I just hope that's not forgotten. I mean, I'm glad to see a step in the right direction, but I know in Leon County, I've talked about it a lot, but since '07, we've lost $111 million in capital and all needs, general fund too. So I hope those are some of the things that are talked about a lot. While we certainly appreciate the step in the right direction with funding. And also this transition to Common Core is a real issue as we move forward. That obviously, I've been outspoken probably more so than my good friends that are here, but about the FCAT, it's time to transition into something that can get us ready to Common Core. There's a great article today, I think it was in the Washington Post or something, that a superintendent in Maryland put out about getting ready for Common Core and how we're going to do this. But those are just some of the things that I know you'll have to leave, but you're going to hear, I'm sure, as we go around this room. And I'm going to let Superintendent Husfeld, if you'd start with the Bay County kind of perspective of what you see as far as what needs are for your district and things you're concerned about, and then we'll move through all the superintendents and give them an opportunity.
And you covered almost everything, but I just want to reiterate, and I'm going to be real quick so we can all talk, but the only thing that I hadn't heard is the technology money that is being earmarked for us. And again, that needs to be flexible, and I'm going to tell you, because Bay County's needs are going to be different than Gadsden and Leon and Lafayette and all the different counties in here. We just spent $30 million in wiring and putting all new smart technology in all our classrooms. So the technology needs we have are going to be different than what another district has. And I've heard something about a monetary amount put on a per item that you can spend that wouldn't allow us to buy iPads for the students, and telling us what specific kind of technology to buy. And that's ludicrous. That needs to be a district decision.
If I could comment on that, right now it appears that there's going to be a fair amount of flexibility in instructional materials and technology. Mm-hmm. And in fact, some of the instructional materials, people are sort of upset because we've got so much flexibility in instructional materials that you can use it on iPads and those kind of things. And I think the technology line item, we're going to see the same type of flexibility in there. So
2014, we have to be digital.
Yeah.
So,
I'm thinking that you'll get a fair amount of flexibility. I think that's an issue that, Mr. Superintendent, you also need to bring up with the commissioners this afternoon, because we have talked to him about it.
Okay, and then just going through real quick, and again, Jackie, and you said this, and I totally agree, and I think most of us do. We have a great relationship with the charter schools, but the message that needs to get out there is they are no more successful, and a lot of times less successful than our non-charter public schools. And so what we want is fair rules. Class size amendment is under all our skin. We spent over $2 million, Bay County did this year, just to reach the class size requirements, and the charter schools don't have to meet that standard.
Right.
So what we want is just treat us like the charter schools. And what gets me is they said, well, we can, it's against the Constitution. The amendment, I said, well, how can the charter schools do it? I mean, that's what blows my mind on that. So we would like some relief on that. And last but not least, I think we could spend all day long talking about the teacher eval system.
Right.
And it is, here's what a teacher told me in a meeting yesterday, and I specifically met with her before I came here yesterday. I want to get her thoughts. She's one of the top teachers. She's a Millikan a fellow and all that. But she said, if you're talking about $2,500 one year to separate us, it's not worth everything we're doing. What she said, if you're serious about this, you need to be talking about $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, because what we are putting these teachers through with this VAM and the whole evaluation system, it's not going to work. It's a waste of energy, time, manpower. They're overwhelmed. The administrators are overwhelmed, and it's not going to work. I can tell you right now. What's the main purpose of it? Can anybody here tell me the main purpose of teacher evaluation system? It's to get rid of the bad teachers, right? So we're punishing the good teachers to find out which ones are bad. But there's got to be a better way to do that, and even if you just looked at learning gains. So I'm off my soapbox now.
I'm with you.
Pass it on.
I think we all are.
And let me just add real quick on the charter school piece. I know there was a bill that went through School of Innovation yesterday in the House, and I know part of it was the standardization of the application for across the board. You know, one of the things that we're arguing is that, you know, one size does not fit all, right? We went through that. We saw that here in Leon County with the 2 charter schools that applied here recently. But we know that one size does not fit all, right? And we can't, I think, in good conscience say, you know what, we're going to make it standard across, because what's going on down with Carvello, down with Albert, down in Miami-Dade, is obviously going to be different than what's going on in Bay and Leon and what have you. And so when we try and, you know, when we try and say we want to standardize things just for the sake of making it even across the board, it's not always even across the board.
Right.
And so we have to realize that and be cognizant of that. But thank you for that.
Superintendent Taylor?
You mentioned most of those, and so did Mr. Hussey up there, but the graduation requirements in the small counties, you know, you talk about technologies in 2014, we still have issues with bandwidth. How do we even cover that within some of our schools that are away from everything? And so, and the PICO question to the small districts, as much as the PICO funding itself, is special facilities is normally a derivative off the PICO funding. There's no PICO funding, there's no special facilities, we can't build schools in the small counties. So, you know, everything seems to have the effect, just like the $2,500 and your VAM data and critiquing these teachers within the smaller one, you can't pay them more. And so, you know, the funding is where everything, the end of course exams and the lack of funding truly that's going to come from that is how do you go from that point to cover them into the summer school, which we don't have funding for anymore, to allow them to do it.
Superintendent?
I'd like to piggyback on your concern about end-of-course exams. I got a recent interpretation from the Department of Education, which was the second interpretation of the law, end-of-course exams, which took away the right of the principal to determine giving credit to a student transferring in from out of state. Now students have to take the end-of-course exam, and you think about a senior transferring into the state of Florida, already has credits for Algebra 1, Geometry, Biology, U.S. History. That student has to take an end-of-course exam. That is unconscionable.
We got to ask the commissioner that question
That
today.
is
'cause
not
how would
right.
you deal with that? And how would you deal with that as a principal and a superintendent?
And then we deal with the parents calling and crying.
And I don't blame
right.
these parents.
Yeah.
It's not right. I'm concerned about unfunded mandates. If the legislature would just give us a year or two to implement, rather than every year changing the rules, that would certainly help us.
That's what we like doing that. That's,
I know. Change is
Job
wonderful
security.
sometimes, isn't it? Whether it's needed or not. I'm very concerned about the students who, as you said before, not every kid wants to go to college or needs to go to college. Certainly the military is a great opportunity, as are other opportunities. But requiring students to take chemistry or physics. I have a young man who won first place in the regional science fair, Three Rivers, who will never be able to pass chemistry or physics, but who invented a steam machine that not only powers an electric fan, but also provides fresh water. Now, I couldn't do that, and probably some of you couldn't do that either, but he will not be able to pass physics or chemistry, and that's not right either. I'm concerned about instructional materials, the cost of dual enrollment, books. We have a very good relationship with Gulf Coast State College. I'm in a very small district, Gulf County. My little old town of Weewahitchka, Florida, finally has two-way interactive distance learning. Wonderful win-win opportunity for our kids, our parents. But the cost of textbooks, whether they're going to be e-books or hard copies, is just unbelievable. So that's a real concern. Performance pay. I think we definitely, if we're moving in that direction, we've got to have better clarification. And how will my district pay for performance pay from year to year to year? And I could go on, but I will yield to my colleague, Paul Dial.
Superintendent Dial, Taylor County.
I want to touch on one issue that has not been mentioned, but it's a issue that's, that something in Taylor County that we have to look at every year, and that's transportation funding. I said, we are spread out over Taylor County long distance. We've got one bus that has to go an extra 42 miles, pick up one kid. Wow. One kid. And to me, it ties right in with safety issues. We've got the 2-mile rule. Years ago, parents would let their kids walk to school and not worry about them. Now, parents don't want their kids walking to school because of the nature of society we've gone into. And so, to meet those needs, we have open transportation. So our transportation allocation does not touch the amount of money we're spending on transportation. But for us to look our parents in our eyes and say, I'm sorry, your student lives 1.8 miles away from the elementary school, you're going to have to walk. So I think, if we're going to talk safety, we need to talk transportation funding. Second, teacher evaluation instrument. I've been in this business for many, many years, principal at middle school for 14 years, and there's never been any one mandate that's done more to hurt teacher morale than our teacher evaluation instrument is. Number one is that it didn't change any of the percentages of high-performing or effective teachers that we had. With the old instrument we had, we felt like that we were measuring student performance and teacher performance with the old instrument we had. And to have a VAM formula that you cannot explain in layman terms, it bothers me tremendously. We had a short district coordinators meeting before I left, and we don't have time to try to explain that formula and how an individual teacher's VAM score was calculated with every teacher in our district. I just hope that maybe we can get some relief. Maybe this VAM scores this year will be invalidated. Another concern is our one-size-fits-all approach to education. We're a small district, one high school, one middle school, one elementary school, and one primary school. We have the same mandates, the same requirements that the larger districts have, but we do not have the resources to do that. And when we look at the students in our community and you survey them what they want to do, the majority of them want to get a college education where they can get a job in Taylor County because they want to stay in Taylor County. And so we don't have the resources to offer such a large variety of industry certification classes for these kids, but we have to look at those industry certification kids that our kids can be successful at, because if you don't have them success, your school grade is going to be affected overall. I could go on, Mr. Pons, but I think I need to.
That's great. Superintendent Pierce.
Well, I've got about 8 of them, but I'm going to cut it down. The number one concern is funding. And what's happened along the coast to our rural districts on the coastal, in the coastal, Gulf County being one, Franklin County being another, is now showing up in Wakulla County. And we have a declining enrollment that is moving at a pretty good rate. And it's starting to impact our funding, and it's going to impact it this year for the first time pretty seriously. And we're concerned about that continuing. Now, that's not an issue that's easily dealt with. It's something that has to be dealt with locally, but it is something that a lot of rural districts are dealing with right now, that declining enrollment, and even some larger districts. But that's the number one priority right now. The loss of the ability to levy the critical millage for the 16 districts in the state that were able to levy that over the past 2 years. I don't see that having any legs right now, but that loss is going to be rough on some districts as we go into this year. Again, with compression, a rural district got great benefit from that millage. And then I think concern over VAM, and I think that this is a real simple statement to make to legislators and those people that are proponents of VAM. If I give you your tax return, if I prepare your tax return and I give it to you, you can decipher that and double check me and make sure that I did a good job preparing that before you send that into the federal government. But you can't do that with the VAM calculation. If I gave you a VAM calculation, I promise you that unless you had special help and probably computer assisted help, you would not be able to calculate a VAM calculation based on that formula. So I leave you with that thought, that we have a process in place that teachers are being measured by, that they cannot physically double check themselves to see that you're accurate as you give it to them. And I think that's a real big question.
Thank you. Anything else, Superintendent?
Well, the only other thing that I would say is that concern over merit pay funding, and I heard that mentioned, and I think the fact that it's recurring in nature, I don't know how much thought's been given to the fact that we do have a lot of high-performing districts, and I heard it said earlier today that I think from a reporter that the VAM scores were actually very favorable this year. We anticipate that those VAM scores will go down as the state impacts those and sets those limits. But the fact that it is recurring over time is very scary to me as a superintendent and a fiscal manager, because I'm concerned that we're going to be able to keep up with that. I don't know whether there's been a lot of thought given to how much that's going to cost us 3 years into merit pay. And then another thought, you've got 2 teachers, they work for 10 years. They both have the exact same number of years of being highly effective. One of them gets highly effective the first year of the 10, and one of them gets highly effective the 10th year of the 10. Who makes the most money over 10 years?
First year.
The first teacher. Just a thought. And I'll stop at that, sir.
Why don't you add about VAM scores to teachers on students they don't even teach? That's a concern with us, is that some teachers' VAM score is calculated on students that they don't even come in contact with.
As we move on, I want to recognize our State Senator Bill Mumford, who just came in. He's also our leader of our Superintendents Association, and he was also superintendent in Leon County, which gives me an advantage overall. So I can call him every time I got a tough decision. Say, Bill, what would you do? But we appreciate his leadership. And Bill, would you like to make some comments as we move through? Or?
Well, first of all, I apologize for being late. I had an earlier commitment that I made a long time ago to speak over Florida State and with all of local government accountants, if you will. And they had far more questions than what I thought. But interestingly enough, a lot of the questions centered on education, the public school system, which I thought was good. But thank you all for being here. Thank you, Superintendent Pons, for setting this up. It's always good to see the superintendents, and looking forward to hearing those of you who haven't spoken, and those who have. I know I probably have talked to you about it before anyway, and would appreciate it. And then at the end, I'll I'll give you my thoughts where I think we are.
Again, thank you, Senator, for being here, and I can tell you, it would have, the last few years have been pretty tough, and I can speak for everybody on this, but we'd be in a whole lot worse shape than we are now if we wouldn't have had his leadership up there in the Senate and all that. We appreciate that. Superintendent Edwards?
Yes, sir. Well, I can't really bring up anything that hasn't already been brought up, but I'll go ahead and echo a few things. As Superintendent Husfeld said earlier about separating the teachers' pay to make this thing actually work. You know, I was in a Senate Bill 736 meeting the other day where we were trying to go through, and they were trying to tell us what the best way really was to have our steps constructed in order that this thing could work out, because it gets pretty complicated when you have one teacher who's highly effective this year against an effective against a needs improvement, and then they switch around next year, and you wind up with just a pretty, just a large spectrum of different. It's not as simple as it is right now just to fit them in. So it's a nightmare to our finance office. But the thing I'm getting at here is one of the suggestions is our steps, let's say there's $748 for everybody across the board, which seems to be the easiest way to do this. And then they're saying, well, for a highly effective teacher, we could make them $750. That meets the ruling, you know, of greater than or equal to, and then you could step down the effective teacher to $749, and then everybody's happy. And you know, I said, yeah, that works really, but what we're trying to do is to get these teachers to work harder and to be that highly effective teacher. And when we're moving them from that secure pay schedule that they're locked into now with their contracts, and we're asking them to step out on a limb and go over here to performance pay, for me, I'm locked in, according to our contract, they're locked into a guaranteed step every year unless I can prove that it brings financial burden on the district. So they're leaving a guaranteed $748 a year to move over with the chance of making $2 more after busting their rear end dollars. So how many people are really going to do that? So you would want to set this thing up a way that you could separate it so that you could really encourage those people to dig it out. I think that's the idea, and we all, you know, we agree with that. But then it comes to a funding issue, and if that is going to be set in there as a permanent each year, I mean, right now, and I know this doesn't mean a lot to big districts, but it's all relative to how much money you get versus how much you spend. Just the $748 a year is $70,000 every year, and what I keep telling them is, okay, in 3 years we're looking at $250,000. If we're not getting an extra $250,000 every year or every 3 years, then we're just falling behind like that every time. So that's one of the things that we've been dealing with the performance pay and trying to get it slammed in. The next thing is EOCs, and we're feeling kind of a bottleneck thing developing here with that as well. I personally spoke to a student the other day that I had when I was teaching algebra. He was in my algebra class. Great kid, cannot get algebra. He could do regular math. He's probably an awesome welder, some certification that we could put him in. He really wants to go in the military and that sort of thing. That's been his passion. And these EOC, he has taken it 3 times now and can't pass it. And now on top of the Algebra 1 that he hasn't passed, now he has geometry, and next year will be Algebra 2. So he'll be facing 3 EOCs, and he hasn't passed the first one yet. So he stopped me the other day. I seen him at one of our get-togethers and asked him how he's doing, and he said he had dropped out of school, that he was just too far behind. So Safe Schools. We met this morning to discuss Safe Schools money, to try to figure out how we were going to spend this money, and in about 5 minutes we had it spent 3 ways. And you know, we really left the meeting, which the purpose of it was this, is to force everybody to come to the table and really fight for how they thought the money should be spent. But you know, I told them, I said, you know, with this Safe Schools money and in the wake of everything that's happened, we really have to spend this money in a way that there really is safe schools. I mean, our SROs, our deans, or whatever portion of their money comes out of that. But we really, between our SRO, which we only have 2 schools, so we got 1 SRO. We would like to have one like everybody else at both schools. But just paying the one, her fuel for the things that she does for us running around town there, and covering some games, football games, and you know, you send them with them, that pretty much spent our money. So we didn't get into security cameras, we didn't get into having some type of buzz-in door system at the office, which we don't have. None of that kind of stuff. This was just pretty much a few simple salaries there, and we were out of money. Industry certification, that's something that I would love to have more of at our school, and we're already facing some pretty significant cuts this year. I mean, we're probably going to lose several positions in order just to make budget this year. So then, in order to be able to introduce a new certificate, like if it was going to be a welding certification or something like that, again, that would just mean a few more positions for me because there's no extra money for it. But and then the VAM scores, like Mr. Dallas was saying. Just one example, we had a teacher who is he's a math teacher, and he teaches a couple of different courses, but none of his courses have an FCAT or an EOC or anything like that tied to it. So he was actually given his evaluation on the reading scores of the students that he does see during the day, but he doesn't teach reading. All of his courses are math courses, whether they're college readiness or whatever. But he actually received the score on reading, and I just felt like that was pretty unfair for him. So we're trying to find a way that we can set up some type of rubric on the classes that he teaches, his AP classes and stuff like that, so that we can be a little more fair to him next year and actually evaluate him on what he is or isn't doing. But that's all I have.
Superintendent Huddleston?
I'll reiterate just a couple, and then I got a list too, but I'll cut them down. One, McKay money, our district went from about $700,000 2 years ago to well over $1 billion. I would like to, I think when that money goes out, there should be some accountability. It was mentioned earlier about charter, but you have an industry, a cottage industry that's popping up where everybody's starting a little school here and there. And that they get mad at us, they leave. And all of a sudden you see them on the street and they're all making A's and they couldn't read a lick when they left. And so there is no, and I understand about parents and nations monitoring, but an A needs to be an A. And they need to take that FCAT. It may not count for anything for them, but they need to be able to give that if they're going to take that kind of money, be it private or charter. One of the things that bothers me is we talk about, well, our students in Florida, this is what your education, but we don't. It's only public. It's nowhere else. And I know they got tremendous lobbies. Many private schools would do a fabulous job. And then there are other, as all you know, there are places that crop up from day to day that if we're worried about everybody, we need to be concerned about them too. I mentioned it before, just last week. I know Senator Monford's going to think I sound like a broken record, but just a reminder in this group that legislation about 15-passenger van, universities can use them. State colleges can use them to transport students for athletics and other things. It's the same money out of the same pot. We can't because of the National Transportation Safety Act and liability insurance. I think legislation probably could handle that, or at least look into it. That would save small districts like us, whether we compete in, if it's academic challenge or in athletics. We're in our soccer, we go from Lake City all the way to Panama City to play in our district. We could send them in that rather than a charter or a large bus. Also, we talk about seamless education, K through 20, and what our colleague here at Gulf County mentioned, dual enrollment. Textbooks are draining us. I mentioned at NEFAC a couple of weeks ago that with our lobbyists there, that at least 2 suggestions. I try not to come to the table and just whine. I try to bring up something to talk about. And if we're going to be seamless, then the state colleges should adopt dual enrollment textbooks for those 2 years that kids would be in high school. And they should have to use them for 3 years and not change them every semester on us. Secondly, they should charge us what it costs. Don't mark them up. I know they're probably trying to support their bookstores and all that, but they should be kept the same. Now, we principal at Columbia High for 15 years. My last in 2 different terms, tours of duty. The last time we had a student that had $985 worth of dual enrollment books, 1 semester. That also includes now the internet connection fee, which you don't get. Secondly, some other computer-based things they have to do. That $985 would have bought 8 other books we would have used for 5 years. And we can't keep throwing money away like that. And it would just, if we're going to be seamless, then they should have to help us. They get a lot of money. They say they don't, but they do. They do get that dual enrollment. FTE graduation requirements, I'd say the same thing. EOC part, we have kids in our logistics and distribution program that take the end of course, the national certification to graduate, can't think of, somebody got to help me. In our CTE programs, when they take the national,
NCCER?
when they take the national skills-based test or whatever career tech academy they're in. And it's our 4th year of our program. 2 of our seniors left because we started them early. They went to target distribution making $45,000 a year. It makes our teachers sick when I mentioned that at a faculty meeting. However, it just goes to the point about one common way to graduate. They don't need that. I won't say what I had in mind, but the same thing, BAM scores. The best example I have is have an autistic teacher has 2 children. That person's BAM score, how do you do that? How does the English teacher's got 150 students over here compare themselves to the, and I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing that. I hope 60 Minutes isn't here on these cameras, but we shouldn't. How do you compare the BAM score of a 2-person autistic teacher that theirs is based on the IEP? So it just causes a lot of confusion there. One of my biggest concerns, and nobody has mentioned this, Senate Bill 154 that is going through the legislature now. It's already been, I had it here, maybe I make it come up. Very simply, it defines school counselors, that every school will have a certified school counselor, but it has a phrase, if I can pull it up here and not waste anybody else's time, that says school counselors should perform only duties as functions by the law, cannot be used for administrative duties, including but not limited to coordinating, administrating, and monitoring academic testing. In a small county, we have 1 principal at the elementary school, and we have a CRT, and we have a reading coach. District reading plan specifically says that they cannot participate in doing those type things. So I want to know who's going to do it. And I know I'm not alone. The testing starts from March until May. It takes 6 weeks to get prepared for FCAT. And then we have PERT and all these things. I mean, we don't use them for bus duty, cafeteria duty, and things like that, but somebody has to help with the test, and we're running out with people. That's a big concern. It's going through the system somewhere. Transportation, we get $2.1 million in Columbia County. We run buses from the Georgia line to 10 minutes from Gainesville, 15 miles. And we run some that are 24-mile round trip. It costs us $4 million to run the buses, and we get $2 million for that. And finally, homeless. Once again, I mean, we need to help them in any way we can. We have a child that's hungry. We need to do anything that we need to do for them to make sure that they're successful. And I stand behind that. However, in the language, if I just use Leon County here, you can have a student classified as a homeless, lives on this side of Capitol Circle, going to school at a high school here, and then for whatever reason moves to Capitol Circle East. And it can be right across the street from Leon High School, and say, I want to come back over here, and you got to send 1 bus to go pick him up.
Terry, did you realize they can do that across counties?
Yes, I can. Yes, yeah.
Well, we hadn't had that yet. I'm just pulling, and here's the thing, we got 400 in Columbia County. The homeless, now we don't carry them on the bus like that. The umbrella definition of homeless is so broad. Just about anybody in this room can qualify if you wouldn't pay your house payment 3 years and lose your house. I mean, for 3 months and lose your house. People have learned to beat the system, and that's who I'm talking about. But we actually run single buses all the way across town taking kids back. Now, I'm not going to say I got in trouble at the last superintendent's meeting, so I'm not going to say something. So I'm not going to say what I'm going to do. It does provide in the summer that you can look and reevaluate that. But if a student is living right across the street, it just isn't right and goes against what I think is correct. And I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Good job.
Pretty good load.
Good load there. Superintendent Uzell.
Yes, there's not much left to talk about, but I will put in my 2 cents on a couple of issues. Having been a career educator most of my career in the classroom, I can truly say that the performance pay is the most demoralizing thing I've ever seen, not only for teachers but principals and the rest of the school. One thing no one has mentioned that is on these formal evaluations, it's taken our administrators anywhere from 5 to 7 hours to go through a whole cycle. So you've got a school with 40 teachers, and you're talking about 5 hours each for one of their evaluations. That principal is spending 200 hours on just one. Many of them have to have 4 formal evaluations a year. So that's pulling our principals away from the administrative duties normally they would be dealing with the students and so forth and so on in the daily workings of the school. Another measure of the invalidity of this whole thing is when I looked at the total scores, the percentages of highly effective, unsatisfactory, and needs improvement. We had many school districts who had up to 95% of their teachers getting effective and highly effectives, yet they had C, D, and F schools. I have a problem with that. You know, I don't understand how someone can work at an F school and you've got 95% of your staff highly effective or effective. That doesn't make any sense to me. Another thing I want to mention, in addition to what's already been mentioned, is the taxing on our counselors. As many of you know, a lot of the school safety issues that we're dealing with are coming from mental health issues. And I don't believe there was any additional funding this time for that. And I'm real concerned about that. I have students and parents calling me, telling me, you know, the problem with suicide and the thoughts of it, it's an epidemic. When I first got into this about 30 years ago, never dealt with even one student who mentioned that they may be feeling like they needed to harm themselves or harm someone else. 5 years ago, I had one student. This year already, we've had 4 and had an attempted suicide. That greatly bothers me. In addition to all of this, with the bullying, the social media is out of control. Now, many of you have been principals before sitting in this room, and you know this. We can say that what goes on at home doesn't impact us. If they post something on Facebook the night before that breaks someone's heart, it does come back to us the next day at school, and we have to deal with it. And so there again, our administrators who are having to go do 5-hour each total evaluations per teacher are now having to come back and deal with all these issues for Facebook and everything else that's going on. So I do think the mental health issues, the training, the character education needs to be looked into with our funding for our kids. Let's get to the root of the problem for why we're having safety issues. We have teachers who are scared to come to work. Last week I was scared to come to work. I had a mother mad at me about a bus issue, wanted a door-to-door drop-off, and she'd made threatening remarks about me on Facebook, and she just came on down. She was ready to rumble. So, not that I couldn't have done that, but if I needed to. I can tell you one thing. I keep a baseball bat in my personal vehicle and in my office. Not allowed to have a gun, though.
She said that.
But it is concerning to us. It's a great responsibility that we have when we take the lives of children in our hands every day like we do. And we're putting a lot on our teachers. We're putting a lot on our principals, our guidance counselors, our food service workers. Even they're vulnerable. And a lot of us in these rural counties and who don't have a lot of funding, and we've got schools that are 30, 40 years old with multiple access points, there's just no way to monitor everything. So school people these days are dealing with a lot, more so than they dealt with 40 years ago or even 30 years ago in my career. I can say I never really came to work 30 years ago fearful that someone would hurt me, but after last week and the things that have been going on in Connecticut and around, I'm a little frightened some days. So I would just like to, you know, for us to try to push forward with getting some help with the mental health issues of our students, counseling, whatever it is we need to do, and get to the root of the problem. Thank you.
Very good. Superintendent Jackson, Okaloosa, welcome.
Thank you. I'm one of the new kids on the block. I'm certainly glad to be here, and greetings from Okaloosa County to everyone. I'm glad I'm sitting right here across from Senator Monfort because I want to look him right in the eye and say, Senator Monfort, when you folks are making all these laws and mandates that we have to live with, please think 21 dominoes down the road. When that first domino falls and you give us that mandate, please think further out than that to the implementation and the logistics of getting that done. I think oftentimes, in theory, things are good, but we don't think far enough ahead. And for those of us that are on the front lines who are having to implement those rules and regulations, it becomes very difficult. So I've just said that right to you today. So I do have some concerns.
I don't know how I got on the other side of the table.
There you go. I do have some concerns as well about alternative diploma programs for our students. In our district, we have a huge CTE component. And as you said, we have many students who leave our campuses, some in our IT programs. They walk out the door and make $65,000 a year. But just like you said, they're not going to pass some of those EOCs. So I too want to add my voice to that voice of concern. As far as our students coming in from other states, we have a huge military presence in our district with Eglin Air Force Base, 7th Special Forces Group that just came to us and brought about 2,200 students with them. Students coming in from all over and having to face these issues with EOCs. It is a concern. It is a very deep concern. The last thing I will talk about, and there are many, and many of you have touched on the same concerns that I have. Teacher evaluation. Because we have the large military presence in Okaloosa County, we have many teachers who are from all over the country. I will never forget this little teacher from Rosa Elementary School who had been teaching. This is her first year teaching in Okaloosa County, and she pulled on my coattail one day and said, "Can I ask you a question?" And I said, "You may." And she said, "Do you people in Florida just try to run your teachers off?" And I said, "What do you mean? This evaluation system is the most ridiculous thing we've ever seen." And I thought, well, so that really made me stop and think, and I agree too with Ms. Uzell. Our principals are absolutely at the end of their rope. We have some in our schools, we'll have 125 teachers in a school with 2 assistant principals. That evaluation system and that we're having to use at this time is currently so taxing on our principals, they can't do their jobs. We're having to look at alternative ways to do budget with our principals to just alleviate some of the issues that they're facing. And I wanted to agree. I believe it was Senator Dial. I'm thinking about Senator Mott. Okay, I'm making sure he's listening. Superintendent Dial, what you said earlier, about the VAM score formula, it was you or one of you. My husband's a mathematician, and he has tried to train me to understand what this means. Now try to explain that to a kindergarten teacher who that's not their thing. I think we've made it far too complicated. We've added too much bureaucracy to the system, and then we didn't fund it. And just my thoughts. Thank you.
All right. Assistant Superintendent Norton, Jefferson County, appreciate you being here.
Thank you, sir. Sitting and listening, Jefferson County is experiencing a lot of the things that you all are speaking of. And being one of the smallest counties that is sitting around this table with one elementary school and middle high school combined, some of the things that we're going through. One of the major problems that we currently are experiencing is we're having a hard time declining enrollment and academic performance drain, which means the best and brightest of our kids are leaving and coming to school in Leon County, going to some of the charter schools or private schools in the county. And then that causes a problem for us because now we're trying to move those that are left a little farther to try to make up that particular academic void. I heard one of the superintendents speak about the dual enrollment cost with the high school grading component and the dual enrollment cost and trying to beef up that particular part of our assessment piece. The cost has gotten exorbitant. We have a number of kids that were going over to NFCC in the dual enrollment piece where we're paying for the textbooks and also offering the transportation, which is a major cost to us. But again, we're trying to do what we need to do as a district in order to get that academic performance back where it needs to be. One major problem that we have in our county that I didn't hear anybody speak about, recruitment and retention of highly qualified administrators, and teachers. Now, we can get them in. We get them in and we will keep them a year or so, and then they take flight. They'll either go into a neighboring county or go across the Georgia line, the state line. That revolving door has really caused a problem for us because you know as well as what the research say, if you're going to have any type of success academically, there has to be a 3 to 5 year sustainability in terms of your leadership, and there has to be some in terms of the classroom and getting that out. So we're trying to come up with some favorable programs to try to keep those young people in place. And finally, Mr. Dow, you touched on it, the transportation cost for Jefferson County is outrageous because we run from the Georgia line to the Gulf Coast. And as you said, we got a couple of kids, we got to run up in a little pig trail about 20 miles off the beaten path to get that kid. And so in terms of our allocation and what we're actually paying out, it's enormous. So we have a lot of things going on in Jefferson County, but please believe when I tell you that we're working extremely hard. I know the media may not think of the press or whatever, but there's some good things going on over there. And if you ever have an opportunity to come over, in the absence of our superintendent, Mr. Al Cooksey, I invite you to come over and see what's happening in Jefferson County.
Right. Superintendent James.
Thank you. I had an opportunity to listen to all the superintendents. I've certainly share some of the same concerns, particularly around teacher evaluation. But speaking directly of Gaston County, certainly the funding issue is a primary concern. Over the number of years I've been there as superintendent, we've seen so many years of declining funding until it really has had an impact on the district. So we're looking forward to better things to come. Senator, funding-wise, I think that's the primary issue that we're dealing with. On a personal level, I think one of the things that concerns me most in these meetings, and I've had an opportunity to be here for a while, see a number of commissioners come and go. I think that we consistently seek to change the requirements for graduation. And I know, Bill, we've talked about this in the meetings, and I don't know what it is that we're seeking to do. It almost appears as if in Florida we're trying to not graduate students instead of trying to graduate.
Right, you're right.
And so that concerns me, and I think that's one of the things that we definitely, as a group, are going to have to attack and really stay on the commissioner and all the legislators to get us to understand that we're working hard with these kids to be successful, and they really need to graduate. And it always seems like, I don't care who's the commissioner, I don't know where the message is coming from, is that they just seem to always keep piling on. They keep changing. Well, you have to really truly pay attention to what's required each year for kids to graduate. And that's a problem. That's it from me, Superintendent.
Right. Thank you, Superintendent James. Gadsden County does a great job. Now, our senator and our superintendent leader for the state of Florida, Bill Mumford. Bill, your floor, you know your way around here.
Thank you. I thought we were fixing to eat lunch. I just found out y'all heard eat. And thank y'all for being here, and thank you again, Jackie, for setting this up. Let me make just a couple of general comments, then I can try to get down to some of what I think will happen to some of your concerns and some that not. First of all, I think if you talking about the new commissioner, my understanding, he's supposed to be here this afternoon, and which is good. I think that hopefully he'll be here and be able to share some of his thoughts with you. As you might know, I'm an optimist, so what I say, let's give him a chance. Let's see what he's made of. I have spent quite a bit of time with him, both formally and informally as well. There's no doubt that his views will differ than ours on some issues, but I do believe that he is open to some of the concerns that we have. And again, I don't want to speak for him. He can speak for himself. I do know he has expressed to me some concerns and questions about the evaluation system itself, as has the Senate President, as has the chair of the Senate Appropriations, Education Appropriation Committee, and the Senate K-20 Substance Committee. So I think I know that there's a lot of concern about the current teacher evaluation system that we have out there. I have a bill in place that's coming now that will address it. I think you'll see we'll be successful to some degree with that. Charter schools, I've got a bill coming on charter schools. Senator Simmons and I are co-sponsoring that bill, and I think hopefully you'll be pleased with you'll be pleased with the bill, and I hope that maybe that unless the amendments water it down, I think it'll be something that's at least a move in the right direction. I know the House now may have a different position on it, but that's the beauty of the process, and so I think we'll be working. I know we'll be working with our House colleagues to hopefully come up with something that will address the issues and concerns we have for charter schools. Charter schools, my belief is that I've supported charter schools in 1996 when it wasn't popular, and superintendents as a whole support charter schools. What we don't support and that we can't agree with is a different set of standards, different measuring tools, and so on and so forth. That message is not falling on deaf ears anymore, including the governor. My discussion with him, he agrees too that if you get a tax dollar, you should be held accountable, same standards. So hopefully with his taking that position, as well as I think you'll see that in the Senate anyway, you'll see a similar sentiment. How far we can get with that, I don't know. There are powerful influences on the other side of the issue with charter schools that have a tremendous amount of influence. But the best thing that's happened to us, those of us who want higher levels of accountability for charter schools and any entity that gets tax dollar, is the fact that some of our charter schools, especially charter schools, have made some really bad judgments. The case where you had a $500,000 payout for a failing school in Orlando, right in Senator Simmons' back door, and her husband as well. This particular case has drawn a lot of attention, as have some of the local cases right here in Leon County, where you had a charter school that closed with what left in effect no records for the students. So I think we'll see some movement on charter schools. In terms of the teacher pay, the $2,500 increase, I know Superintendent Edwards has expressed a concern about that, but my discussion with the governor's office and the Senate leadership is that everybody understands that's an ongoing expense. That's not a one-time deal, and so we have that commitment, and so those of us from North Florida, you earned your bond. So hopefully that will give you some relief there in terms of not having to worry about it, because it is a pay raise, or it will be a pay raise, and it won't be a bonus. Now the question is on the $2,500. When that was first rolled out, it was $2,500 per teacher, every teacher. And then the question is, who's a teacher? Are you guidance counselor, media specialist teachers? As an example, some say no. Some say yes. My advice to them was, if they're a member of the bargaining unit, they need to be considered a teacher. Don't get into that fight about who is and who's not. Let somebody else worry about that. So I think what you'll see coming, at least from the Senate, is a position that a teacher, regardless of what they do, is a teacher, and don't get into that fight. The $2,500 across the board this week, I think there may be a little different take on that in terms of does that mean $2,500 to everybody, or does that mean an average of $2,500, which is a big difference? Keep in mind that whatever it is, it's got to be negotiated. It's got to go through the process, which is fine, which is my opinion, is the way it should be. Don't try to dictate Tallahassee what the raises is going to be. Let that work through the process. I will tell you that there's a lot of concern about straight across the board raise with no flavor, if you will, of performance pay. I think what you'll see coming out of the Senate is a combination of the two. I think you'll see that. What you'll see is that everybody, there will be something passed so that everybody will get something. Every teacher will get something. But I also think you'll see a flavor of performance pay in there somewhere. That decision has not been made in terms of what that would look like. But I think that's what you'll see. In terms of the advanced placement courses, we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with some of the college presidents and some superintendents. Bill, you were on there.
You mean dual enrollment?
Yeah. What did I say?
You said advanced placement. You meant dual enrollment.
Yeah, dual enrollment. I'm sorry, dual enrollment. And the books issue was a hot topic. And if I might, Bill, why don't you? You took better notes than I did. Why don't you?
We agreed to disagree and continue the conversation with the college presidents. I mean, it was a very positive meeting, but we understand their problem, and the books did come up, and the changing every year of the textbook, and us dealing with having all these books. So it's
the bottom line to it is that the college presidents feel as though they're getting the short end of the stick, and superintendent feel that's not the case. And I think our position is much more valid and stronger than theirs. There was a suggestion early on, a couple of months ago, that we tap in, or the students, if you will tap in to their Bright Futures allotment and help pay for the AP courses, not AP, dual enrollment. I disagreed with that early on, and I said I don't think that's a way to balance the budget, if you will. Those students, when they graduate from high school, they deserve to have full Bright Futures waiting on them, and not having spent some of that taking dual enrollment classes. I'm confident that'll work out. Probably not this year, but if it doesn't work out this year, at least at the school district level, you won't lose anything. And I think the biggest focus we have to put on, I mean, some things we can solve, like books. It's wrong to have to change books every grading system. So I think there's a lot of movement and agreement among the presidents that needs to be addressed. Let's see, what haven't I touched on? EOCs. My position has been and continues to be, with unlimited amount of funding, I don't think we can get where we need to be in the time that we got. It's just not going to happen. I don't think physically we can get it done. I've got a bill coming up that would delay the implementation of everything basically 2 years, just push it out 2 years, which is a reasonable approach to it. And I think I've got some support across the aisle with that. Again, there are powerful forces outside the legislature that takes a different position, that we're on the right track. You hold people's feet to the fire, it'll get done. But again, I'm hoping that reasonable people would look at what has to be done and forget money. Just forget the money, the funding part of it. I think they'll find that it's going to be exceptionally difficult to meet, to meet the deadlines that we're facing. I think hopefully what you'll see is certainly not a retreat. This is not an effort to retreat or to back up from accountability at all. It's a matter of being practical. It's a matter of getting it done as quickly as we can. But to make sure that we got to have a reasonable timeline. This is not a delay tactic. It is, to me, is a reasonable approach to it. All right, what else have I missed on here? Well,
Questions for Bill?
yeah, now's the time.
Go ahead, sir.
Workforce funding for the technical centers, the numbers, the preliminaries that come out show a pretty marked decline in that. Is that how it appears that's going to play out? Or is that
Well, let me talk about the governor's budget in general for a minute. I'll touch on that specifically. If you look at the governor's budget, I think what you will see is a reflection of what he heard from superintendents and teachers and others. You know, when he went around the state, whether you like him or not, whether you agree with him or not, I think what you see in that budget clearly is a reflection of some of the concerns that he heard expressed. The workforce dollars, I think you may very well see them show up in another arena. Clearly, the graduation, past graduation, I've also got a bill coming in that look at 3 different pathway maybe to graduation. Every child, we've fallen into that trap, if you will, that every child got to go to college, and we all know that that's not the case. I mean, it's not that they're not capable of doing it. The fact is, a lot of kids don't want to go to college. They want another career that does not require a college diploma. We seem to have, and this is not recent. This has been last 2 generations. Some of y'all older people around here, y'all may remember it. Used to, we had different ways to graduate, and you got workforce program. I've got right here in Tallahassee, I have 3 of my former students that own their own plumbing company, own it. 2 that own their own electrical company, and let me tell you, they're not hurting for money. One that owns his own roofing company, got the 2nd largest house in Tallahassee. Okay? It works. Okay, so good examples out there where you can have a very successful career and not go to college. But we have seemed to have slipped over into the position that we, meaning the society in general, feel like you got to go to college to be successful. I don't believe that, and I think we need to address that at the state level to say there are other ways to have a successful career. You don't necessarily have to go to college, and that's where it falls on us. But I think that's another reason, and I'm very glad that President Gates changed our committee structure where we are K-20 now, and we're no longer K-12 and higher ed. We're K-20 appropriations. We're K-20 substantive. But it's incumbent upon us to work with our colleagues in colleges, community colleges, and universities to have I hate to say a seamless system, but that's exactly what it is. And so I think what you'll see is that the workforce funding issue may show up somewhere else.
Senator, just to get a little clarity on the issue about funding for teachers, you said that you thought that the Senate would basically move toward a performance pay situation. With that $2,500 is the performance pay part going to be in addition to the $2,500, or they're going to take this and divide it up?
Take and divide it up. Okay. Here's what the governor's position was, that everybody gets $2,500.
Right.
And that's real. I mean, that's easy and simple way to look at it. But I also told them that you got to go through the process. I mean, you can't. I mean, it's got to be bargained. And then there were others then who stood up and said, "But wait a minute, we've been going for performance pay now for years. In fact, some of you may not remember this, but we've had 4 or 5 performance pay plans in the last 15 years. They're good plans, but they didn't work because there's no money. And now people are saying, well, wait a minute, we got $480 million now, we can make it work. Right? Yeah, but we also want to make sure everybody gets something. Okay? The last thing we need to do at this time in the economy is for some people to get some and some get nothing. You talk about a morale breaker, that would do it. So I think what you'll find is I think you'll see a combination of both. Hopefully that what that means is that everybody will get something, and then there'll be another piece tacked onto it. I don't know what that will look like yet. I've been asked to work on it, and so we're working on it. But I think that's what will finally pass out of the legislature. Remember, the governor recommends, the legislature approves. Of course, he can veto too. But I'm hopefully we'll be able to work something out based on, quite frankly, based on what we've heard from superintendents and school board members and teacher unions.
Senator, real quick, on the suggestion that there might be some legislation passed with different tracks for a diploma, would that exclude them from the requirement of EOC for Algebra 2 and Geometry, which is ludicrous? And I agree with Superintendent James. We are, instead of helping kids with their future, we're almost forcing them to drop out right now.
Well, I'm asked that question quite often, Bill. And what I do is go back and say, remember how we got to where we are. Okay? And it was through a lot of discussion, a lot of committee hearings, and so on. And there were those who expressed dire concern early on that we're boxing kids out, if you will. And that there's a lot of sentiment to say, no, wait a minute, you know, should we really require every child to do that? But there's another force on the other side that's saying, if we're going to compete in the world, you know, look at the scores of all these foreign countries and all, look at this and that, why in the world would you not require Florida students to meet the highest of standards? Now, they don't go the next step, though, and we all know that what the other countries' public education system doesn't look like ours.
No,
okay?
Totally different.
And we know that. If we, you know, I mean, that's just the way it is. So I don't know. I think the jury is out. I think that there will be a lot of intense discussion on that issue. It will not be a non-controversial
A
bill.
suggestion, and then one other question. A suggestion would be to have all the legislators take the Algebra 2 and the Geometry EOC and publicly record their scores, and I don't think you'd hear another word about it. But a lot of our smaller counties, and we're a medium-sized county, have brought up the transportation issue and problems. And if my calculation is correct, we're reimbursed 44% of cost of transportation right now. That is a major problem for all of us. We spent approximately $8 million last year, and we're reimbursed $3.9 million. And we have, believe it or not, some of the same outlying areas we have to transfer. It's a major problem. I mean, it is a major problem, and we're having to take dollars away from the classroom to put into transporting kids. And
Jackie Pons will tell you to go no petrol and your problem solved.
Yeah.
But no, you're right.
I mentioned you put GPS, 3 cameras with voice, so we can tape everyone that climbs over a seat for that mama that doesn't believe that their child would ever do anything. You know.
It is historically it's ranged around 40% of the cost. You absorb at least half the cost. Now, what the other opponents of that thought will say, well, you're some of you guys out there have a they've told me this. So some of your superintendents have the motto, you call, we haul. If you follow the law, make them walk if they live within 2 miles, and don't pick them up except, you know, you don't have a bus stop on every corner. I said, let me tell you what is the real world. The real world is you don't want 25 middle school or high school kids at one bus stop. Okay? That won't work. Okay? So not only is it convenience, it's a safety issue, keeping them spread out through all that route. And then the other thing is, you tell a mother or dad they're not going to pick up their kindergarten kid, you're going to make them walk across the 4-lane highway down there. Right. And so, and you all of you have safety committees that consider all of this. And the fact is, if you are not reimbursed for those costs, and it's real simple. So you're between a rock and a hard spot. And and that's that's another issue that we just got to keep hammering away on. But let me just say something in general too, though.
Don't you think when that 2-mile rule was invoked, that it was a whole different society we were living in now? Instead of, now when we set our bus routes, the number of sexual offenders we have in our county exponentially grows because everybody says they've got one in their neighborhood then. Parents just don't want their kids walking to school. You know, and if they have to choose between art and that child riding that bus, they're going to choose riding that bus.
Now, you know, some districts have started charging, and I'm not sure how that's going to work out. Some of you may have, I'm not sure, but I think I'd be real careful.
What I didn't understand.
Charging.
No, don't put that in writing anywhere. I got enough problems. Okay.
Be careful about that. Let me say something in general, though. You know, this is a good meeting. But I think I can speak for my colleague across the aisle over there, across the hall. You know, you're preaching to the choir. Okay, I've been with Halls of Bashirs, and I share, I think 10 counties, and you know, you have a meeting in every county. We're going to be in. Last night we were in Jefferson. Monday we're going to be in Madison, I think. And so we hear a lot of the same thing. And I think I can speak for all three of my colleagues in the House. I think you're preaching to the choir. But here's the problem. We've got to get everybody around the state, especially your colleague, and y'all have heard me say that, is to get to your local delegation members. I mean, that's, Senator Simmons' IQ is off the scale, okay? He's a constitutional attorney, and I mean, you can look at him and tell he's smart, okay? And a good guy. I was his vice chair last year. Learned a lot from him. And what got his attention on charter school was that blew up in his backyard, and he had no idea, you know. And of course, you know, first thing I heard about it, I called him. I said, "Tell me about that charter school back down there," okay? And gave me a chance to needle him a little bit. So we're working on the charter bill, and all. But the thing you got to do is we all got to we got to say, here's the real issue, and it's not griping. It's not a problem at all. Ms. Uzell, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, your safety thing, I heard you say at a meeting where you were assigned 2 or 3 babies you got to pick up and take out when there's because there are all 400 of them around your office.
In our facility, yes, we have
Yeah, and there's
the child care, infant care.
But we've got to get I really believe that, at least in the Senate, and it has to be true in the House, that if people really know what the real issue is out there, and they talk to them about transportation, and it's a fact. Here's the facts. I mean, this is what we have to do. We get X amount of money for transportation. This is what it really is going to cost us. And the only way for us to live within that budget, even come close, is not pick up any kids within 2 miles, not do all of this. No, don't have any picking up kids here and taking them to a magnet program. That's what it will do. But we've got to get the message to the delegation members. Somebody mentioned guidance counselors. Let me tell you, that bill is Senator Dietert. Senator Dietert is a former school board member. She knows schools in and out. She's one of the biggest advocates we have to help us. The problem is guidance counselors got to her. I mean, they made a very good case, and it's all true. We all have said for years, guidance counselors are far overloaded. I mean, if you look at when I was principal at Lincoln, each one of the guidance counselors had 450 students. Now, how many in the private world, how many people have a caseload, if you will, of 400? That's not going to work. I mean, also, you take them and you put them on bus duty, you put them on lunchroom duty. So the fact is, you know, she responded to that, you know, and I applaud her for that. And so, but it's a good case.
What was her other? My question to her is, who's going to do that?
Well,
that's the question.
Yeah,
who's going to do that?
But let me tell you what the problem is. Nobody's asked her. I mean, I've asked her, but I mean, nobody back home. You haven't had the Administrative Association, or you haven't had psychologists, because generally what happens is another group will show up and say, we want the same thing. you wait till you hear media specialists show up, or art teachers, or whomever. I'm not picking on them, but that's somebody. I mean, using that example of you get them informed. I mean, because what's going to happen, that takes away the tool away from you. No, it's like technology. I mean, you know, these kids have got to take the exams online. Well, first of all, how many do you even? I use Liberty County as an example, and not the only one. They don't even have cell service in parts of Liberty County. Okay, Dixie County. The superintendent one time told me that 72% of their homes have no telephone service. 72%. And we're going to talk about kids taking online exams, you know. So so those kinds of examples are what you got to get out there. And it can't all be done down here in Tallahassee. It got to be done at home. Especially if you got the president of your, I'm going to look you straight in the eye. You got the Senate president in your district, okay? I want you to call him today. All right.
Oh, he knows me.
He has a lot of respect for you, a lot of respect.
He does.
He will, he does, and he'll listen to you. He's, give him a little, Don Gates has been a superintendent. He has sat where you're sitting, and it's reflected in a lot of his decisions, a lot of them. He's done very well. Okay.
I have a question, sir.
All right.
Each year, when the legislature is through passing laws, and we get interpretations from DOE to the best of their ability, I understand, and then we get our little Florida school law book, and when the law is in there and the language is very clear, why do the lawyers for the legislature get together with the lawyers for DOE and reinterpret? Then it goes to school board, to the state board for rule, and it gets twisted. Does it ever come back to you legislators before it goes to state board rule to see if that intent is true? I sent to Marcia, your liaison, my concern, and it's the end of course exam, and students transferring in from out of state, and the law specifically says the principal makes that determination of whether or not credit earned from out of state should be accepted. That interpretation, that language has been changed and interpreted so that anybody coming in from out of state has to take an EOC, even if they have earned credit from out of state. And as she mentioned, in Okaloosa County and the Panhandle, we have a lot of military kids. And not only that, just, you know, coming in, that's not right, Senator.
Well, clearly, if the legislative staff has misinterpreted the intent of the legislature, then we'll take a look at it.
I forwarded it to Marcia. She's got it.
Good.
Please look at that this year.
Oh, I will.
Because that's not fair to those kids, and it'll start. It's when they 9th and 10th graders, your 9th graders from 9-10, but we'll have some juniors and seniors transferring in, and we're going to have problems. I wouldn't want my child as a senior to have to take an end of course exam for algebra, geometry, biology, and they had those courses 3 or 4 years ago and already earned credit.
As much emphasis as there is on economic development, and you
That's
bring
what I
all
said.
these companies in, and we're facing that in Columbia County, why would they want to bring, if they know, because those executives usually have children that are going to school, so why would they want to come in? To me, it stifles just what we're trying to do as far as developing economic growth in our state, outside of tourism.
And I made that statement to her to give to you.
I got it.
2 weeks ago.
Well, I'm sure she's working on it.
I taught Marcia.
She'll be working on it.
Good.
Okay, well, any other questions or I might try to answer? Or
cost of developing end-of-course exams for districts that are, that's one of the issues that is coming down, and we've talked about it, I know, in our curriculum area, that in some of the larger districts have these, end-of-course exams, and they're even talking about possibly selling them to some of the smaller districts.
Well, the whole issue of end-of-course exam, you remember how that started? You got Race to the Top money and how that was split up and so on. I had serious concern from the very beginning that some school districts were taking on the responsibility and the money to develop these end-of-course exams, because it concerned me that those courses were split, and DOE took the core subjects, and hired some company to do it, and then the rest of them came over here, and then so I'm not sure that there was enough money allocated to the district to really do what needs to get done. Not only that, I go back to the time factor. Educators are different than the private world. The private world over there, you can, I'm assuming, stop what you're doing for a week or two or whatever. You don't stop with those kids. If you do, you got to have a substitute in there, and then the parents get mad. So when it falls back on the teacher, you say, well, when are you really going to do this? Not going to do it winter break, you're not going to do it spring break. Try to do it in the summer. Well, how many summers we got left? And then you got to go through the long drawn out process. So that's why I keep saying that there's not enough time, regardless of the amount of money you may have. You don't have enough time to get done what needs to be done. But the superintendent's right. The cost of these is tremendous. If you remember, some of you have been around long enough to remember, we started on the end-of-course exam 4 years ago, I think it was, in Hillsborough County, remember, was going to be the depository, if you will, of end-of-course exams. Everybody's going to write them and send them in, and they're not going to charge anything. And for a lot of different reasons, that didn't exactly work out. So it's not, and I keep telling people, it's not a question of sitting down. Well, some people think it's like a semester exam. Well, you just have a semester exam. All of you turn in your semester exams, and then you got them. Well, it doesn't work that way. So no pun intended, we got a lot of educating to do for a lot of people.
I bet it'd be interesting to go around, and we won't do that, but how many people are prepared for that? I don't think anybody is, and I think most of the districts are kind of ignoring it, but it's there. And I heard recently that Hillsborough might be offering an opportunity for DOE to purchase these, and then provide them to everybody else free, that they would have them, but DOE is concerned about the liability, so I might want to ask them about that today, of issuing this. But that's a real issue I think we all face. John Mixon, he's our lobbyist. John, if you'd give us a briefing of the session and everything, so we'll give Bill a chance to eat and take a phone call.
Well, I tell you, Wayne Blanton and Bill Mumford covered almost everything, but I would like to say this. The Senate has been much more agreeable in discussing end-of-course exams, the train wreck that's about to happen. And what is that? Well, we have Common Core, PARC, assessments, pay for performance, instructional materials, and digital conversion all coming at one time. Within the next 2 years, they're all going to happen, 14 and 15. We've been warning the Senate. So the person responsible for the assessments, Senate Bill 736, there were two of them. Your good senator, Madam Superintendent, was one. The other was from Jacksonville. But when it passed, they made the statement that we understand this is our one shot to pass this. We want it on the books, and then if we have to, we can delay things and phase them in and whatever, but we've got to get it on the books or it'll never happen. Well, thanks to Bill Mumford and Senator Dieter from Sarasota and Senator Simmons and others who are listening to Bill Mumford, they're working on a way in the Senate to phase in or phase out or move back some of these things. And Don Gates has already said we got the cart before the horse in terms of these assessments. They also know that the teacher organization is watching all this. If you're going to do pay for performance, it better be right. You better have the standards in place. You better have the instructional materials there. You better have the training there, and it has to be valid and reliable. None of that's in place. So they know that they're going to have to do something about this. I think they're leaning very heavily on Senator Mumford to come up with the bill to do that. And so I think that you're going to see that in the Senate. The House has always been more reluctant to, and much more conservative than the Senate to entertain these ideas. The bright spot, folks, is that yesterday in the House we had 4 superintendents. One from I think he was from Dixie County. We had a superintendent from Pinellas, and Dan Boyd from Alachua. One other.
Peg Smith.
Yes.
From Volusia.
From Volusia, Peg Smith there. And they laid it out, and they talked about end-of-course exams. They even made a specific recommendation to the committee that is chaired by Janet Atkins, former school board member, very conservative Republican school board member from Nassau County. And at the end, she was saying, yes, we've got to do something about all of these issues. End-of-course exams, multiple avenues for students to get a standard diploma. They don't want differentiated diplomas, a diploma, but if you're on a career track, you shouldn't have to take Algebra 2. You ought to be able to take a test in your career track that is high standard equivalent to Algebra 2, but in your area. It's amazing. Joe Pickens was there, who is chairman of the colleges, all the community colleges board. He's president of that group now. And he said, I'm a lawyer. I have never in my life been asked in any interview or ever had to deal with Algebra 2 in my career. Ever. Ever. Or physics. Or chemistry. So why should I have to take all this? And the committee, the House committee was there saying, yeah, you're right. Now, they say if you live long enough, things that go around come around. I guess I've lived long enough, not as long as Bill. Wayne Blanton is by far older than I am. But it's coming back around, and there's some sanity going on the House side with these very issues. So I think that we're going to see some phasing in, some delays of some of these things to give us time to make them work, which is big. Textbooks. The governor came out and recommended that we eliminate the textbook adoption cycle. They want to use the textbook money, make it flexible to school districts so you can buy hardware and digital textbooks, etc. They've been reminded that the common element of instruction in the state of Florida that has taken us from the mid-20s up into the top 5 in the nation has been the quality of the instructional materials. Teachers vary, schools vary, leadership varies, but the instructional materials that we've had designed for Florida have been pretty doggone good. If we eliminate textbooks and we go all digital, if we eliminate an adoption cycle, if we eliminate the DOE negotiating a price point, the folks in Lafayette County or Columbia County going to pay a heck of a lot more than the folks in Miami-Dade County. So there's a lot of pressure on the legislature. My understanding is that Senator Mumford will have a bill. In fact, he's working on a bill. I'm working with him on a bill that will provide that we continue to have some type of adoption of instructional materials with some state negotiated price, whether they're digital or textbook, and let districts make the decision of how they're going to transition into that. The other thing that we're asking for is, you talk about end-of-course exams. There's been the suggestion that in those courses that are not the courses that VOE is doing, so that if you have those other courses, you have to have end-of-course exams, and you're using some type of instructional material for that, that the company providing that instructional material will have to provide an end-of-course validated, reliable end-of-course exam to go with it as part of the price that they deliver that instructional material to the district. Don't know whether we'll go there or not. The senator and I have not even had a chance to discuss this. Joy Frank and I are supposed to discuss it today, but there's a lot of discussion with regard to that. So I think that the House, Senator Mumford, is being led by someone that I thought would never be really involved in education, and that's Elizabeth Porter from Columbia County. She stepped up to the platter. She had the research, SREB and other research, that said that we must give students alternatives to get this diploma. And she was going to take the bill herself, by herself, and then leadership found out about it and said, hey, this is where we want to go. So she's taking a big lead in that, Terry, and I hope you'll stay close to her in this effort. So I think there's a synergy with the leadership of the Senate first, and now the House is coming around to really have some serious discussion. They're going to be discussing it in the House. Jackie, you had 2 or 3 people there yesterday to testify. I think we're going to see some very productive results out of these discussions in the House and the Senate this year.
It gives us hope too, because you remember the parent trigger bill, we had 8 or 9, correct me, Republicans that joined the bill to defeat that. I mean, if we wouldn't have gotten that type of collaboration, that bill would have passed.
Well, the key senator, the last vote that we had to have to get that tie was Alan Hayes, who was from Lake County, a solid senator, and whether we can keep him or not is to be seen. He's not an educator, but he likes Bill Mumford. And that's all I can say about that.
When you were talking about the textbooks and the digital and all that, I've heard some wild things about how, who, or by what means are we going to provide students with iPads or whatever to access digital textbooks. I've heard bring your own device.
That's the DOE proposal, is that a lot of students have their own devices. They have phones, they have computers. The money that they had originally proposed was that every district would first provide the needs for every classroom to have access in the classroom itself. And then secondly would be the iPads or whatever, the Samsung, which is their big competitor product, to take care of it in the school. And then they had calculated how many kids had their own instruments. Well, y'all, you just can imagine. No, you just can't. None of us can imagine how bad that is, because we would have viruses. You'd never be able to use your computers again.
That's right.
So they're getting some sense into that now, and there are all of us lobbyists in Fell, and fortunately we've got some pretty good leaders. We have a lot of educators in the legislature, and they're listening. And now that we've got some conservative Republicans on the House side listening, under the leadership of Will Weatherford, who's almost yours, it's working. It's working. It's coming together. And so I think, Mr. Mumford, you're going to have not only a phasing in for some of these assessments and things over the next couple of years, but I'm told you may also have an instructional materials. Maybe not you, but you're helping somebody else write it. So
That's my bill.
that's your bill? Okay, well, you never told
He's
me that,
working on it
so
right now.
I'm just trying to get you to admit it.
Quick with the commissioner, I had a couple of superintendents that requested, John Hunkier, if you'd please stand. He is our Chief of Safety and Security. And if a couple of superintendents wanted to meet him, know who he was, if you'd like to come look at our 24-hour, 24/7 security monitoring system, he'd be the one to show it to you. And we're currently working with Wakulla, doing some things with them to help them and reaching out to some of the rural counties, just sharing resources in order to, when it comes to security, I think that's something we're gonna have to do in the future anyway, as a region. But John's the one to know on that. And John, what's your number if they wanted to give you a call, phone number? Could you?
I brought some cards.
All right, cards, if you'll give them out to them, that way they'd have them and they'd have it. John's really good at what he does related to that.
Does he have someone manning that system 24 hours?
We got people that run, we got individuals that are in there 24/7, even on the weekend, that are monitoring the cameras. You know, we have the GPSs on all the buses on the routes in there too. John, anything you want to say about that? What we're doing in there? We got a minute if you wanted to.
Yeah, the security center that we have, for years we had a couple different alarm companies that were monitoring our schools. We took advantage of some Department of Justice grants to build the center, and then we took over our own alarm monitoring. So once we activate our alarms, we become a central station like you would have for your home alarms. And because we put camera systems in all our schools starting about 6 or 7 years ago, we tied that all into the same center. Also with the new technology, with bus monitoring, with GPS and emergency alarms on the buses and all of that, we tied it all into one facility. We operate it 24 hours. It's also a big resource after the school district closes and the last bus comes in. We have one published number for both parents, principals, or anybody that has a question about the school district. They can call 922-KIDS. The number is recorded. That doesn't mean they get a message machine, but we record the conversation that occurs. We also have 800 megahertz radio system, so we can monitor the sheriff, local police, and fire, so that if there's an incident in the community, we can get the information to the school quickly about lockdowns, as well as when to come on and when to come off. So it's basically an emergency operations center as well as our monitoring center.
Thanks, John. Again, I think this next hour will go pretty quick. I want to thank Commissioner Bennett for coming in. I know he's busy. You know, he's a former basketball coach, and you know I was a former basketball coach. I didn't ask him if he won a state championship like I did, but I'm assuming that he probably did. But no, we welcome him here. And I tell you one thing. I think Bill said it earlier, and I think it's a great point. It's great that we do have a commissioner that's willing to come out and talk to superintendent. I asked him, I said, you know, what question? He said, hey, whatever anybody wants to ask. And again, we welcome Commissioner Bennett. We've got about 12 superintendents that have been here. A couple had to leave, but it means a lot to us that he's willing to come out here today and just welcome. And appreciate you being here. And if you want to give a few opening remarks for
Sure, and I'll make my remarks very brief because I want this to be what you want it to be. I want you to ask whatever you want to ask, say whatever you want to say. I'll take notes, I'll respond as I can. I would share with you probably the one thing I will never pretend to have is all the answers in Florida because I've only been here 4 weeks. And you know, Senator Montford's heard me say this a couple times, I have mastered the route from home to the office, and that may be about it right now other than where my office is in the Turlington building. So, you know, if I don't have a direct answer or a specific answer, we will take notes and get them for you. I just want to say how happy I am to be here. I think Florida is a leader in the country, and I say that being from a place in the rest of the country. that really admired the work Florida has done for many years. And that's not to say we can't do it better and we won't do it better. We are. We will do it better, and we'll continue to find ways to do it better. But I've always admired the work that's done here. I admire the fact that it seems like there is a climate in this state among educators that is more open to reform and change than any place I've ever witnessed. And I think that's a tribute to many people. Our legislature, I'm shocked that there isn't a day goes by that there isn't an education discussion in our legislature. And I think, again, that exemplifies the priority that this state puts on educating its children. So I want this to be for you. If you want to, when you want to introduce yourselves, you can. If not, I think I can read the nameplates. Fire away. And the only requirement I have is my name is Tony. I will tell you, we're much more informal in Indiana. We had a governor whose name was Mitch, and we kind of always said that was what was on our birth certificates, so we kind of like to use that. So that's the only requirement I have. I've had people around the office say, well, we can't call you anything but commissioner. I said, well, I've got a choice. I don't have to answer. So let's just open it up and fire away, and don't be shy.
Commissioner, I'm going to start then.
I'm going to start by not answering you.
Yeah. Again, we're going to, if we could, we'd like to give you kind of the minutes of what all we've talked about today to take back. That way you'd have it. One of the issues that we've talked a little bit about today would be our end-of-course exams. And you and I talked a little bit on the phone, and I appreciated some of the things that you did in Indiana and everything related to that. I think Bill has always reinforced that as superintendents, we want to really respect the highest level of accountability possible. You know, we believe in having the highest standards, but we feel like with all, as the EOCs come down, and we supported them, and actually we still support them in a lot of ways, but we're concerned that we don't have multiple pathways for kids to graduate. And the kids that happen to fail these EOCs the first time, and the structure of the test right now, when they have to go back and retake it, they can't actually get credit for what they've already mastered. They just retake it over again. And I know there's a lot of talk on both sides about some possible strategies related to that. Would you be willing to discuss that, kind of how you feel about that and the future of that?
I think first it's a very unique time for us to be discussing this, because I think all of us know we're going to be breaking into a new assessment regimen. And just to give you a little bit of information around that, it's nothing I don't think it's anything you don't already know. The new assessment regimen will have multiple cuts, and that's what I was talking to Jackie about the other day. The Park assessment is likely to be an assessment that will deliver multiple cuts. And those multiple cuts will have different descriptors in them as they pertain to post-secondary readiness. So I think what we have to start thinking about is, if we're going to solve this problem, I would say we need to think about two things. One, let's not think about what I've heard referred to as the log jam of kids and the percentage of kids who haven't passed, because I don't think that's the way. I've never been a person who believed we should make decisions based on impact data. I think we make it based on what is good statistically and right instructionally. Now, I say that because I think the next discussion point is, I think we should be having this discussion about pathways and how we think about the assessment regimen in a forward-thinking manner in terms of how it will apply to those multiple cuts coming out of the Park assessment. I think, how do we align that system? And this is what I was talking to Jackie about the other day. How do we align our system so that it is in alignment and not disconnected from what will happen when Park is rolled out in 14-15? Now, I am a former career and tech ed guy, so I have a very strong opinion about multiple pathways. And I think the discussion, our challenge on this multiple pathways issue is to begin the discussion with, what do we believe all children in Florida should have? And the best analogy I can draw is the analogy of post-secondary. we all walked into college, most likely thinking about what were our general ed requirements. What were the things we were all going to have to take? Then you go to your major. So I would hope one of the ways we think about this is, what are the prerequisites for kids? And then let's use the pathways and approved courses, approved certifications in the pathways as the branches toward those quote-unquote majors, if you will. I think that's a way to think about this, because I think that enables us to totally walk away from this issue that we're trying to walk back from, accountability and rigor. I think we have to say, once again, all students, we believe all students should be able to operate at this level. Now, you know, if you want to be an honors diploma type student, and I'm using different state lingo, old state lingo, you may want to go here. If you want to have a business and industry focus, maybe you will use your major courses, part of your major courses, to get a career in tech ed certification in welding, auto tech, you know, Cisco, CCNA, whatever it is. So that's kind of where I think we will start seeing this discussion, but I think the real discussion point for the legislators will be, what are those prerequisites? What are those baseline push points, if you will, where we think all children who are going to proceed beyond high school, which we hope they all are, we believe they all will, what will they take? Does that help, Jack?
Yes. Any follow-up, superintendents, that anybody has on that, or?
Well, does that mean that every student needs to take physics and chemistry?
Well, again, you know, here do I believe that all students have to pass the chemistry and physics into course assessment? Okay, that's a different discussion.
Well, I mean, in the course of this pathway, you take our career and tech ed program in our school, where they get that industry certification to graduate. Does that kid have to take?
Here is where, let me tell you what my experience was and what we were looking at. And I don't know how applicable this is here, because I'm still trying to learn that. But let me use two different examples. One of a program that I have a very high regard for is Project Lead the Way. Project Lead the Way is a very rigorous pre-engineering biomedical program.
We have them. We were working very hard to say, if your students take Project Lead the Way, does it make sense that would substitute for physics and a math? So we were aligning the standards of Project Lead the Way with those standards, and our state board was approving that as an alternative pathway to satisfy those courses, okay? And I think the same discussion can be had in career and tech ed. How do we align those standards to satisfy the requirements for those courses? And I think that's a discussion that is, when we talk about that kind of major and that association with higher ed, I think that's where the discussion has to go. Does that make sense? No?
Because I'll give you a real life example in our logistics distribution program, where last year would have been the 4th year, and we had 2 students that graduated. We now have 153 students in the program that will have their national certification as they leave, along with a high school diploma. Now, we had 2 seniors that just graduated last year. They're now working at Target Distribution in Lake City, and they make $45,000 a year the day they got out of high school. Those kids would not have passed chemistry and physics, and they don't need it to be successful on their job.
Or probably algebra too.
Well, I'm just going to the top of the line here. They don't, and there's not a course equivalent that they need to be successful in that job.
Well, again, I'm going to go back to my experience in career and tech ed. I believe I could take in any career in tech ed, especially where you have a certification, a true rigorous national, state, or industry certification. Not, and I think we all know that there are others that are not that wouldn't fit that bill. But if you have a true rigorous certification, then I think the discussion should be open about how we enable those courses to stand in place of the chemistry and physics courses under that major. That was my point. But I think we can't just say we're going to accept that. We have to go through the due diligence of making sure that the rigor of those courses meets the rigor necessary to allow us to say that. Because again, being an old school operator, I know the path of least resistance in kids and families and schools, and I just think we don't want to set that up. But I don't have a problem in your direct example of saying that's a rigorous certification. It probably besides certification, it would probably even include some dual credit opportunities, dual enrollment opportunities. So that should be a discussion where I believe, and what we were doing in Indiana, we were taking those to the state board to approve as acceptable pathways in lieu of those courses. And that's kind of the very direct way of saying that.
All right, somebody else.
I'm going to bring up the PERT because of the way it's set up right now. It's limited in the number of times the students can take the test. We currently have college placement tests that they have to take to be able to take a dual enrolled class, and they have to score a certain level to be able to do it. PERT puts too many limits on that, and tracking it is a nightmare. We have first of all, there's North Florida and South Florida. There should be Dakota and North Florida and South Florida states. You're meeting with North Florida. We're a lot different than South Florida. The frustrating thing that I might be wrong, so if you guys speak up and ladies speak up if I am, but in the state of Florida for the last, 10 years, it seems like we want to do the newest and best thing, and sort of like building a new car, and then we have a lot of recalls. And it's not that we're not wanting to do the best, but our timetable for doing things and the thought process that goes behind it is not connected. We jump through hoops to do it, and then all of a sudden, wait a minute, we did that. That's in law. I mean, the teacher evaluation system, you really don't have enough time to talk about that. And I know you're involved in that, and I know that you're talking about that. But there's a lot of things like that, like the PERT, like the teacher evaluation system, that we have shoved down each other's throats without giving thought to the impact. And the impact, and you made a statement when you first started, was that, we need to look at what's best. I'm paraphrasing. And that's fine, but you also have to look about the impact. If we don't look at the impact, then why don't we just raise taxes the way they should be and say that's what needs to be done? But I mean, you always have to look at the impact. You can't ignore the impact on students, on teachers. Not saying that we don't want to get to that level, but there's an old acronym about being smart. It has to be measurable, attainable, reasonable. And I don't think Florida, we've forgotten about that. Now, am I right or wrong? Have we just kind of, whatever's new and whatever sounds good and smells good, we go after it. And it's not that we're against that. Our teachers don't mind being evaluated. And I'm going to finish with this, and I said this earlier. I met with one of the top teachers in the state yesterday. She's a dynamic elementary teacher. She's a Millikan Fellow. She's all this. She said, if you're talking about giving me $2,500 to go from effective to highly effective and all this that I have to do to go along with it, it's not worth my time. And I think if you went around the state, you'd hear that from every teacher. Are we talking about $2,500? Are we talking about $5,000? Are we talking about $10,000? And you put your money where your mouth is. The state of Florida hasn't done that. We've talked about it, but you were talking about, tell them the amount you're talking about, giving your effective and highly effective teachers next year.
The scenario that we had put before us was, since we're already on a standard, like everybody's on an equal step of $748, that's in the union contract, everybody gets it. with this new performance pay, the idea was put forth as, why don't we just give the highly effective teachers $750? Then that meets the criteria of being, I forget what it is, 75% greater or whatever that is. And then the effective teachers would get $749, $1 less. And what we were having is we were kind of looking at it, and I'm like, well, why, if we're trying to encourage the highly effective teachers to move over, why would I leave as a teacher a steady $748 increase every year to get $1, possibly $2 at the max more, and also with the risk that I didn't get that? Because if I move over to the performance-based scale and I don't get at least effective, then I would not get any step at all that year. So and I know that the idea is to get those teachers to move over to that, to encourage them to get over there.
Sure.
So.
Well, let me see where I can start, because you threw a lot at me.
I'm sure you've heard most of this already.
Yeah, a little bit. Let me first start with the idea, and I want to come, so don't let me lose the whole evaluation performance-based pay issue. But I want to start with the whole idea of kind of the scope, sequence, pace of change. Okay? In Florida, I think you have had some incredible benefits, and while you think it's been fast, many people from around the country look at Florida as the place that probably paced this correctly. Okay?
Those that don't live here.
And the reason I say that is because you guys have what, Senator, a 10, 12-year history in this discussion. And if you look around the country, no one else has a 10 or 12-year history of doing this stuff. As a matter of fact, you want to do a quick Google search, you'd find a lot of people say, I shoved this down people's throats in 2.5 years in Indiana. Almost the same scope of reform. Now, I would suggest to you that the benefit you have is being able to do this over 10 or 12 years as opposed to 2.5. Okay? There is a huge benefit to that. On the flip side, here is the place I think we have work to do. And this is where I think all of us around this table need to come together and be committed to this work. Is when you do something over that length of time, sometimes what you do in year 8, 9, and 10 doesn't fit very well with what you did in year 1.
They're not even connected.
Exactly. Whereas when you do this over 2 years, your memory's still pretty fresh, and there is an intentional effort to try to align the reforms, so to speak. So I think one of the discussions we have to have is, where are we out of line? Where are the alignment issues in these things? And I think that's a very tough, that's the tough work here. I'll give you an example, and I know Senator Gates, President Gates has mentioned this directly. I have been a person who has said many times that the educator effectiveness discussion nationally, and spending a lot of time on Capitol Hill in D.C., I've had discussions with the legislative leadership, and I said, don't put, in the reauthorization of ESEA, don't put any educator effectiveness language in that piece of legislation. I think I'm making the alignment issue here. All you have to do is align 2 data points if you want to see fidelity. Because if you're using a growth measure, and there are only 2 statistically valid growth measures in the United States, there's the one we use here in Florida, value added, and there's one called the Colorado Growth Model, student growth percentiles. Those are the only 2 statistically valid measures we have. If you're using one of the 2 of those, there should be some correlation between school performance and the performance of the professionals in the building. Okay, i.e. if you have a school that is annually an A school, I think it's pretty reasonable to think most of your teachers are pretty good. If you have a chronically F-performing school, I think it's a really hard case to make to the general public that most of your teachers are effective or above.
But let me ask you, just interject, and I want you to finish that, but how does VAM tie into the school grades?
Well, I think that's the whole discussion. I think that's the whole discussion. And that's why I talk about alignment. Because I think that's where we have to start thinking about some of these issues in alignment. So I just want to say that because I think, again, in this context where you guys have done this huge volume of work that many people believe, you know, I was accused of trying to take Florida, Indiana, okay? Believe you guys have done phenomenal work in terms of school accountability and certain things. You have done it over a period of time where I think maybe the problem was at times we didn't align the reforms, okay? So that's one of the issues I want to work on, but I do want to talk specifically about this educator effectiveness piece because Governor Scott was pretty direct with me when we came on board in December that he wanted me to pay special attention to what we needed to do around that. I would share with you that I have some very strong feelings about the educator effectiveness legislation. I would ask you to go back and review because your legislation here is written very specifically around a Race to the Top grant application. I'm going to take you back a couple of steps from that. Has anyone done a quick read of the original Race to the Top grant application? Not Florida's application, the original Race to the Top grant proposal guidelines around great teachers and leaders. There were 4 big ideas around educator effectiveness. Big idea number 1 is teachers should be evaluated annually. I don't think anybody argues with that one. Number 2, an evaluation should provide meaningful input so teachers can get better. I don't think anybody would ever argue that one. Number 3, evaluation should include a significant portion of student performance in the evaluation. I don't have a problem with that one. And 4, it should inform HR decisions. I don't think anybody has a problem with those. My question to you, and I'm going to throw this out as just a general question, I'm not going to give any opinion, I would ask you, thinking of those 4 big ideas, where did our educator effectiveness legislation disconnect from those 4 big ideas? Because I think if we went back to those 4 original ideas, we could fix this pretty quickly. So that's my challenge to you, that's my request to you, is to give us feedback on how we get back to the original intent, the big ideas around educator effectiveness.
Well, it was one big idea. The one big idea is to identify and remove ineffective teachers or help them improve, but it really, the whole premise is about finding the bad teachers.
But see, that's wrong.
But that's what it is.
No,
that was the climate when Senate Bill 736 was passed.
But you just hit the issue. That wasn't the big idea of Race to the Top.
No, but as you said, Senate Bill 736 was built around Race to the Top.
So, but herein lies the problem, and this is again a national issue. This is where everyone who is like me, and I'm guilty as charged. I've been dutifully and rightfully probably put in that group of education reformers who push very hard that we should have educator effectiveness and we should pay our teachers the way they perform. I feel very strongly about that. We allowed, and I'm saying a group of people that I communicate with, work with every day, we allowed the rhetoric around this to be about getting rid of people. And that was terribly, terribly wrong. That's what makes this very hard to implement, because true educator effectiveness policies should be first and foremost about how we recognize great teaching.
And that's how the teachers perceived it, as a gotcha instead of what can we do to help.
Yeah, and the second thing it should do is it should get, the one thing that I would say that great, I think you will know when we hit the right spot when you see a widespread change in discussion in school buildings around good instruction. That's when you know you've hit the mark on educator effectiveness legislation, is when you really start on a day-to-day basis hearing a difference in the discussions in your teachers' lounges, in your classrooms, about what is good teaching. Because the places that are really hitting it out of the park in the implementation of this type of policy are the places where, truthfully, the focus is on recognizing great teachers. I think it's wrong you only have one Teacher of the Year and one Milken Award winner. I mean, we got more good teachers in the state of Florida than that. And two, how do we help every teacher? How do we give them really good, meaningful feedback to get better? And I think that's where we missed.
But Tony, with all due respect, and I'm going to shut up after this because I want everybody else to talk, but with all due respect, if we take the premise that this was about rewarding good teachers, where's the money? Because we've never been serious about it. There's been no money on the table. And teachers, we had 4 furlough days in my district last year. Anybody else have budget cuts or anything? I mean, so there's been no money on the table to say this is about rewarding good teachers, not about punishing bad teachers.
Now I'm going to push on you a little bit, okay?
Sure.
Because here's where I sometimes get, because you can't have it both ways. Because in some instances, you will tell me teachers don't do this for the money, but then you just ask where the money is.
Well, because the premise was we're doing this to reward good teachers.
So in many instances, what I have found is when you have great teachers, and you have career ladders, maybe the monetary compensation isn't great, but I'll tell you, if you've been to a school that has implemented the TAP program, sometime walk into a school that's implemented the TAP program and watch the pride of a mentor teacher and a master teacher as they work with their cohort of teachers they work with. That, in many instances, I've had TAP teachers say to me, that for me is the recognition. That's recognition.
I agree with you, but there's no money even for that. I mean, if you take away Hillsborough County and the Gates big money they got to implement that, none of the rest of us have any money to implement any of these programs. And so I know you had nothing to do with this, but Senate Bill 736, if we take away the premise that it was about getting rid of bad teachers, and we were all sold on it's only about rewarding good teachers or develop a program to recognize them, there's no money to do it. I mean, so what did Senate Bill 736 do? That's my question. And like I said, I'll leave with that. And I know you didn't create that, but there has been no meat to Senate Bill 736 to make anybody think it was anything but punitive. And I'm going to shut up.
Okay.
I'm going to address this commissioner. You don't have to say nothing back to me.
Yes, sir.
But I was taught to respect my elders.
That hurt.
But I can tell you, and Mr. Stu Greenberg over here can validate. I did get that right, didn't I? Because he's been there. I'm just a pretty simple guy. And for 15 out of the last 22 years, been a principal at elementary, middle, and high school. 15 of the last 22, 2 tours of duty at the same high school. And I've been through Fry, Reading First, everything. And there's no question in my mind, particularly since 2000, that instruction in Florida has gone off the chart. There is absolutely no question in my mind. There is no question that teachers work harder than they've ever worked in their life. And they do work. And my county is no different than anywhere else. Everybody has them. But yet, I've been through every reform, like many people at this table, that started in Florida. I have counted and put them in silos, and I put them here and try to calculate all this kind of stuff. And every time, just my little simple mind, I'm thinking, what in the world are they thinking? And just last year, with whoever they are that wrote all that, I don't know who all that may be. But last year in our county, when the last one was put on us, we didn't even get the final teacher evaluation under Marzano as a principal. I did not see last year the final document that a teacher was going to get until January. And we get compared to business all the time. We get compared to that. And my thought was, I don't know a Fortune 500 company in America that would treat their employees like this. Secondly, I told my administrators that we would not be terminating a teacher. I was fortunate that I really only had to have, I only had it, but you gave me my gift and the genie come out, I'd pick maybe one or two that I needed, that we were working on. But once again, when we were doing that, you had teachers, you didn't have the right stuff to do that. I mean, I just couldn't, I knew that if I tried to dismiss a teacher, and we had the year before, and if you check in that county, there's probably nobody much higher than me at doing that. And I disagree, it's hard to get rid of them. It's not. You just got to do your job as a principal. And that's part of our problem. Our principals have not done their job. And I haven't at other times, but then when you reach that point, you know what you got to do. But if I'd ever went to court or arbitration last year under what we did, worked under, and that lawyer asked me, Ms. Huddleston, were you comfortable in your training? I'd have had to say no. Because it was the worst training ever devised that I've ever seen. It was totally unfair to teachers. And we could mark one time on our iPad and it would totally destroy a teacher's score. And we had no control over it. And I know that's probably a little bit of rambling, but it just seems to me, and I think what's been we've done so many things so fast. And I'm about getting better. We have to be better. But we need to, at the high school level, I think we've had like 34 changes in the last 4 or 5 years. We need, and if we are reading fourth in the world compared to, second, our fourth graders are second in the world to Hong Kong and all the things that we've seen, and we're sixth in the nation and all that. I'm not saying we rest on our laurels, but I'm saying that we need to implement what we're doing and let's see if it's doing good before we jump on another big thing next year. And this, it just makes common sense to me that there's no fair way to judge teachers. If my language arts, I'm getting judged on my kids, and my friend here is teaching math and he gets his kids because they're FCAT into EOC, and my friend over here has special ed with 3 kids that are nonverbal that she's graded on her IEP, and then another person over here gets a school grade on reading that they don't even teach. But Mr. Greenberg will tell you, and it was said here, I don't know who said it, but I'm going to have to disagree with him. I don't care if they are teaching math, they're still teaching reading. And that's something that we did at our school. Common plan, mentors like you're talking about. We had a SIG grant where we implemented all those things and incentivized teachers based on how many students, level 1s and 2s, passed or rose by more than a grade level, much like an AP. A different way to reward teachers, incentivize them. People may think it's crazy, but $250 per semester for each teacher that didn't miss a single day. We had 47% of our teachers that didn't miss a single day of school. You cannot put a dollar value on that, not having a substitute versus somebody in the classroom and teaching reading across the curriculum. It was just inherently unfair. And unless we change it, we're doing the same thing again. And I know if I can figure that out, surely everybody up here can figure that out.
So, this.
And I don't know the answer. I don't know how to take that special ed teacher that's got 2 autistic kids and grade them the same as the person that's got 150 English kids, or the AP teacher that's got AP Calc with 7 kids. I don't know the answer to that, but I know what we're doing is unfair.
And I think that's where I have a huge interest, because I do believe you guys, I would push back on you a little bit, Terry. I do think you know how to do this. I think you collectively, when I say you, I think around this room, we can figure out it. And it may not be perfect, because I don't know that there's a business that evaluates their employees perfectly.
But I believe they'd show them what they were going to get when they hired them.
But my point is, I think we can solve the issues we're talking about, but we have to take a look at how we think they need to be solved. And I'm open to that. What I want to hear from you is, how do we solve those problems?
I'm willing to help solve that problem. But I can tell you the time when we started with the silos and all that other stuff, I don't know that we were ever asked how to help solve it. And maybe we're on our own worst enemy. But if we know it doesn't work, I'll get a motel room for a week. If that's what it helps to get input, at least I can have ownership and feel like we're doing something that's right.
And I'm asking, because again, I'll, again, with that, I don't want to say anything that would put Senator in a tough spot, anyone else. I just want to say this. Philosophically, okay, I believe in two things. And this is not a political statement, this is a philosophical statement. First, I believe in a federalist system of education where states are responsible for educating their children. Okay? I believe that's the way the Constitution's written. I believe that's our charge as a state. And I think when you drill that down to the next level, I believe if you truly want innovation in a federalist system of education, that the state should rely on the local school districts to inform it on best practices. You know, I think the job of the state is very simple. And that is, one, to set expectations, and two, hold people accountable. Okay? And in the middle, we kind of tell you what we found around the country that might work best in other places. But at the end of the day, you got to make that decision at the local level. And the decisions you make are either going to get you to those expectations, or they're going to be decisions that are going to lead to you being held accountable. Okay? So I am a person that believes we should be thinking about that in this discussion around 736. What do you think? How can you tell us the way to best evaluate teachers? What should be the role of data in that discussion? Going back to the idea that it's a significant portion. Okay, I think there are a lot of discussion points where superintendents can be in this game and truly guide this discussion in a very positive way. And I think a lot of it revolves around how we are able to provide you that opportunity. Because I do believe you can help us solve the problem. I don't think, and I'll say this as a state commissioner, I don't think the state holds the answer on evaluating teachers. You know, I worked in a district for far too long. I was a principal, I was an assistant superintendent, I was a superintendent. I got to tell you, I never got up in the morning thinking the Indiana Department of Education really knew what it was talking about. Okay? I never did. And so when I became superintendent of the state of Indiana, I didn't walk in with the delusion that anybody thought I knew what I was talking about either. So I think the best thing we can do is have you tell us the best way to evaluate teachers. And I want to hear that from you.
Tony, if I could add on that, I think one thing, and I agree exactly what you said about race to the top when you take those four components, and I think superintendents would embrace that around the state. But one of the things, and this isn't any reflection on you because you just walked into this, is that I think superintendents have felt like in the past that maybe their input wasn't listened to when it came down, because there were so many people involved in making the educational decisions for this state that were not educators, you know, that had never been like you as far as a superintendent or a teacher. And a lot of times we gave that input, and that input was ignored and changed all the way at the last second. I mean, I remember sitting in a meeting one time, and your point is valid. We've done a lot of good things in this state, and a lot of this reform has helped a lot of students, and we need to embrace that as superintendents. But at one time there was discussion that, you know, when you hear people say things like there's too many A schools, we need to change the proficiency level. And I can remember, I think 21 times we've changed proficiency levels in this state. And each time we'd get a little better, we'd get over the bar and keep doing it. And we always embraced that until it got to the point that some people started questioning, well, we're doing such a good job in certain areas, you know, we ought to celebrate that success a little bit instead of trying to find a way to continue to make it more difficult. You know, if you're either doing good or you're not. And I think one of the points that you made is a valid one for us. I don't think there's that many terrible teachers out there. But I do think we have to accept responsibility that we could have done a better job identifying those and getting them out of the classroom. And because we didn't do that, we opened the door for other people that are not educators to start making these decisions. And I think we have to go back to that. I think anybody that tries to say that if there is a bad teacher in a classroom, we all agree we need to get them out of there. Our students cannot afford that, and we need to embrace that. But we need to, I think, also spend as much time talking about how many great teachers do we have in this state? How many outstanding educators do we have that are out there? I mean, I think we have some of the best teachers in the nation. And I think if we were as committed to funding education, and money doesn't solve everything, but in recognizing our good teachers, as much as I hear talk, even at the legislative level, about what to do to get rid of teachers, I think our system would go further and further. And that's why I agree with your 4 points on race at the top. And I think we can solve this evaluation problem. I think superintendents can solve it, if they're listened to, and if it doesn't get changed at another level with people that don't have a lot of educational experience. That's been the problem in the past. I mean, think about that as a superintendent. 21, 22, 23 changing proficiency levels, or making statements like, we have too many A schools, so we got to change the criteria. And that's caused some frustration, I think, among superintendents in the state.
Well, again, Jackie, I will, I'm going to throw myself at the mercy of all of you sitting around this table. Hey, I'm guilty as charged. The rhetoric around education reform has not been kind. Okay, let's be very direct. Let's be very honest about that. The rhetoric around this discussion is polarizing. Okay? Folks who run around in the crowd I run around in, I have been characterized as anti-public school. I've been characterized as anti-teacher. I've been characterized as anti-anything around public education. Okay? On the other hand, folks I run around with might say that many of the educators are defenders of the status quo. So you've heard both ends of that spectrum. And I think we got to get out of that discussion and solve the problem that exists in the middle. Because, I always say to people, it amazes me that I'm anti-teacher, and I encourage my daughter to be one. I don't want written on my headstone, "Here lies the man that ruined the career his daughter chose." But I think what we have to do, Jackie, is get around that, is get through that. I agree with you. This is a discussion that we have to listen. I want to go to something Terry said. I was astounded about 2 years ago when I met with I used to meet with about 15 principals, 15 superintendents. I met with them about 6 times a year. And I asked our principals when we were in the throes of this educator effectiveness legislation, I said, how many of you are sitting around this table were formally trained on how to evaluate good instruction and good teachers? 0 for 15. So I went to their deans of their schools of education that I met with on a regular basis. And I said, so let me tell you, I just met with 15 principals. I'm sure it's a representative sample. Do you guys not teach them that? And of all things, you know what they said? Well, it's a problem with collective bargaining, because everybody has a different contract in our state. And different people have evaluations written into their contracts. We really don't know how to train them on their individual evaluation instruments. I said, so there aren't some common themes around good instruction and good teaching, things like that we couldn't be talking about. So Terry, I think you're exactly right. In many instances, we did this to ourselves, and I think we've got to work ourselves out of it. And part of the discussion around 736 and part of the discussion around Race to the Top and Great Teachers and Leaders is we have to have a culture of evaluation. And I would argue with you, I'll argue this till I'm blue in the face, I don't think, as a person who's been an educator since 1983, I don't think we in education have developed a strong culture of evaluation. I don't think we have developed a culture where teachers are evaluated for positive reasons to make them better, not to get rid of the not just to get rid of teachers, but we haven't developed that culture in this business. And I would tell you, great teachers and leaders, as part of Race to the Top, was about that. Let's develop a culture of evaluating our educators, treating them as the professionals they are, giving them meaningful feedback, and making them better in the classroom. To me, that when I walked into those meetings, that's what I thought we were supposed to be doing. What else? Fire away. I'm having fun.
I was going to say this. I'm a new superintendent, and I've been in education for about 24 years. I'm the dreaded worst kind. I was a coach that became a principal and moved on into
As am I.
the world. And I'm naive to a lot, but I have been in the business with everybody here. And I think I don't envy your job as you come to Florida at this time. And the reason I say that is because you have to look at the past sometimes to understand where we're headed in the future. And the past has been one of punitive action in many cases for what we were trying to achieve, and manipulation of the game we were trying to play. How many of y'all remember the year that they monkeyed with the third grade scores when they came back wrong? They didn't like them. They just delayed the release, and then we all got higher scores. And I calculated that year roughly that they gave everybody 30 points that year. What I'm trying to say in that is this, is that at the local level, in dealing with the state and the mandates that have come down here in Florida, the only thing that I really am proud of as a principal at the school that I worked at, and we were very successful, a high-performing district and a high-performing school. I'm really proud of what our education reform over the past 12 years, and I guess we're taking that back to the point that we began the high-stakes testing. We've helped more of our ESC students. That has improved instruction for ESC students. That's the one sole thing that I'm most proud of, being a part of all this whole traveling show that we've been in. The evaluation tool and all of that, the thing that concerns me there is the massive amount of money that we're spending to implement, and it's taken so much time, and I'm concerned that we may not be directing it the right way. I almost wonder if we missed it here in Florida when Georgia went to implementation of Common Core with their Race to the Top money, rather than the evaluation system. I'm wondering if maybe we missed it there. Maybe we should have worked on the curriculum that we're going to put in place to be measured by for the high-stakes testing and the teacher evaluation and BAM before we got into coming up with the evaluation tool. That's just a question that I have. But again, I'm naive. I'm new to the game at this level. But this is where I've been and what I've watched as I've traveled through. So it's hard for us, I think, sometimes to have trust and faith in the decision-making process at the highest level. And that's what you inherit as our new Commissioner of Education. You come in and inherit that history.
Well, and it's fair. And here's the thing I would ask you, and I've said this to Senator Monfort many times in the short time I've known him. I want to know if we're in your way. Okay, I have one of the people in the country that I have the most respect for, Secretary Duncan. I consider him a friend, I consider him a colleague, and I am always amazed that when I talk to him, one of the first things that comes out of his mouth to me is, if my department's in your way, I want to know, and I want you to call me directly. He said, because my goal is to clear it out for you. It's your job. Well, I said I honor two things. I honor the federalist system of education, and I honor local control. And if we're going to hold you accountable and we expect decisions to be made at the local level and we're in your way, I want to know where it is. Because I think it's my job, if we're going to hold you accountable, to get out of your way in the areas where we need to get out of your way. Okay? And I hold that, that's a very strong conviction of mine. Now, I don't know if that cleans up the mess, as you put it, but don't feel sorry for me, because I got to tell you, I love my job, and I think we have great things ahead. Is it going to be hard? Yeah, it's going to be hard work. Are we always going to agree? No. But you know what? The fact is, I love to sit and I love to solve. To me, the most fun thing I do in a day, besides hang out with my wife, is solve problems. And these are big problems. They're important problems. They're the right problems to solve. So, you know, one thing I hope you'll see from me is I'm going to roll my sleeves up and we're going to get to work and we're going to try to solve them.
Commissioner McCann, I know you've got to take off and all. First of all, Commissioner's wife is a high school principal, so.
Believe me, I hear about school business all the time.
The other thing is, Commissioner, I think just from a 50,000-foot level, if you look back over the last 15 years, I think if there's been a concern and a criticism, it's been that those in the school districts really have had a backseat in the process. And that and a backseat to those outside organizations that have some would consider a different agenda than what we have. But if you look back, again, over the last 15 years, if there's been a fault of what we've done in Florida, I think we've put too much emphasis and too much credit on outside organizations that don't have a firm understanding of what goes on, and less of a voice from those in the district. And I know you and I have discussed that, and I'm delighted at your attitude and your approach to being commissioner. I can tell you that when we went from an elected commissioner of education who sat on the cabinet to an appointed superintendent, many of us got out and campaigned for that, and the reason for it was to remove politics from education. And obviously that didn't work. But I remember too very distinctly in a meeting with a few superintendents, the commissioner at times said, and to his credit, he was being open and honest, and he said, the Department of Education is moving from an assistive organization to a directive organization. We will tell you what to do, and we'll be directing. And so I think, and that has happened, and that's okay as long as those in the district have an equal voice and equal footing with those from the outside organization. And so with that,
well, let me just say very quick. First of all, Senator, I've been very much appreciated your help in my first 4 weeks in this job. Senator's been a great sounding board, and we've had a lot of discussion. So I want to thank you for that. I'm going to tell you very directly, I will not run a department that tells you how to run your districts. Okay, the Turlington building is not the central office for the biggest school district in the state of Florida. I always tell Secretary Duncan, don't act like the superintendent of the largest school district in the United States. I do believe our job is to set the expectations, hold you accountable, and tell you what we think works best in the middle, but you have to make the retail decision in the middle. That's not me. And so I want to say that if what you're used to is a directive department, we will give you our best information. But I don't want to be in the business of telling superintendents how to run your districts, because I don't think that's the job of the state. You still have duly elected local boards, you have duly elected superintendents, you have duly appointed superintendents, and you have principals and teachers, and I think that's your job. So my challenge to you, my request to you, my offer to you is let's come to the table with creative solutions to the problems. I will share with you, I'm not a real good person that when we have a proposal out on the table that the only thing you hear is no. I don't like that. I don't deal well with that. I always appreciated when people came to the table and said, I think I see where you're going. I don't think you're choosing the best way to get there, and here's a solution that I think works better. And that's what I hope. I hope that's the relationship we develop, and I hope that's the relationship that gives us the meaningful feedback from districts that allows us to get this stuff right. So I ask you, come to the table with creative solutions, come to the table with clear ideas on what might work, and let's throw them up on a board and let's beat them to death and let's get it right. And let's not be afraid that if it's wrong, we can fix it. If we broke it, we can fix it. That's just part of the game. And again, if we're in your way, you call my office, get Katie, tell Katie you want to talk to me, and if I'm not there, I'll call you back and tell me where we need to get out of your way and where you need our help. So with that, I thank you for having me today.
Excuse me, could I make a statement real quick?
Sure, I was going to let you do that right now. For Michelle Raywinkle-Vassalinda, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Pons, Senator Montford, Tony. My name is Michael Guerin, and I work for Representative Raywinkle-Vassalinda. I'm an economist / staff assistant. She sent me here. She wanted me to make a statement on behalf of her today. She apologizes that she couldn't make it today. She really wanted to, but due to scheduling conflicts, she couldn't. She just wanted to let you all know that she is the ranking Democratic member on the Committee for Choice and Innovation, and she is working very hard to make sure that the district's concerns are communicated to the chair and the vice chair. And she just wanted everybody to know that they're all new members, but they are working very hard. They're very smart people. They're very passionate about education. They're all working very hard on the pension reform that we talked about earlier with the stakeholders and with the legislators and with leadership, with grave concerns to where we're going with pensions. And she knows that they're asking hard questions, and she wants to make sure that those questions are dealt with wisdom and fairness, and that the reasons that we're on this path are good reasons. And that was her statement. And I just want to say on a personal note that it was an honor and a privilege to be here today. My family has a long history of education. My grandfather devoted his career to education at FSU. My grandmother devoted her career to education in Wakulla County. And my mother is a science teacher, and it was a real honor, and I feel like I am much better equipped, and we look forward to working with you all, and especially our friends in the Senate, and everyone here today. And please, if you have any more concerns or want to speak to the representative about anything that you talked about here today, I will relay everything that I was able to absorb to her. And I look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all superintendents for being here today. We'll do it again next year. And special thanks to Bill and the commissioner for being here. Thank you very much. Nice job. Good job.